What is happening out there, rotoscouts football fans? Welcome to the show, gang. A couple minutes late, sorry for that. Kept you waiting. Hopefully you guys were having a good chat. Looks like Trey and Cujo were here hanging out. Seth's here. Seth says, start the damn show, it's Pollard week. I thought every week of this season so far was going to be Pollard week, or at least a whole hell of a lot of them. Hasn't really worked out for us yet. Kind of focused in on that passing game. Obviously, it's been pretty elite. But yeah, I think there's room for Pollard. Definitely going to have some, let's put it that way. Projects out well. Brian Robinson is my sneaky running back of the week. I don't know how sneaky he is. I haven't actually looked at a ton of ownership yet. A little bit behind on a lot of this stuff. I've talked to you guys in the chat and on the shows and everything the last couple of days, but just been behind on football all week long. So finally got it done last night, late night. Fun one yesterday, basketball-wise. Had a sweat for the top of the FanDuel board. Got to first place. Was sitting in first place. Just had to wait out the fourth quarter of the Clippers game. Was getting chased down by a lineup. The one lineup had Harden in it. Was like 15 points back, 18 points back. And then one that had Harden and Kawhi in it was a little further back. Clawed its way up. Needless to say, if you saw how that game ended. 6 seconds left in the game. I'm up by a handful of points in first place. 100K in my pocket. James Harden, 4-point play to win the game. Still okay. Couple of points shy. Or a couple of points up still. Game ends. Game ends on FanDuel. Game ends on the NBA app. All the scoring apps. I wasn't watching it. I don't usually tune in when I'm trying to sweat holding a position. I'll tune in when I'm trying to catch up to a position. I don't think it's as fun to watch when you're just losing. You're getting chiseled away on. So I'm sitting there, game ends. I know that point changes, stat changes always happen. So I know you got to wait it out. But I figured once the NBA app went final, we were okay. 5-6 minutes go by. We might be okay here. Then all of a sudden it starts going crazy. Bouncing back up, down, up, down. All of a sudden the 104 point to 100 point game becomes 106 to 100. What the hell happened? Apparently they awarded Kawhi Leonard 2 free throws after time was expired. He was fouled on the last rebound of the game with 0.2 seconds left. So with time expired, essentially, because you need 0.3 to do anything, he shot 2 meaningless free throws that only had meaning to me to take me from first to second place on FanDuel. Only an $80,000 swing. That's okay. When I lose creatively. So that was a fun one. So we sat through that before getting to the football projections last night. That put me a little bit behind on getting all the notes and everything together that I usually have for... I just usually do like screenshots of all the different stat tables for each player and have it all laid out where I can talk through all the different targets and everything. This week I've got most of that just in the spreadsheet table that we normally look at. Says ouch. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm complaining, but I still had a very nice 5-figure day. So... can't complain too much. Most painful 20 grand I ever won. But second place, not too bad. Yeah, just a creative way to get there was, I thought I'd share the story. Oh yeah, that reminds me also, congrats to Mikey Briggs, M. Briggs, in our Discord. Took down a very nice day yesterday in one of the early slates, the Express slate yesterday. Took first place for a grand, 1,200 total, had first, 6th, 9th, 27th, 35th. Shouted it out on Twitter. I appreciate that. But always love seeing the winners. I've had some good days lately. A lot of people taking some stuff down out there. It's just the fun of it, Seth. What are you going to do? You can only laugh. Can only laugh. It's not losing it. It's just not winning it, right? It was never mine to begin with, so can't cry over it. But I get you. Maybe a little bit of, it's just happened so many times before. But yeah, just got to grind off that edge after a while. Trey, what's going on, buddy? Yeah, appreciate everybody who's here hanging out. So the point of all that preamble was to say that, we're going to take maybe a little bit lighter of an approach. I'm going to try and knock this thing out like 2 hours. We're not going to go complete marathon style, try and get everybody up and out by 10. Try and have Larry, have enough time to listen to the show tomorrow morning and still be able to build his lineups. Top 10. Some other guy won 100K. Yes, he did. Yeah, I bet he was really excited about that stat change. I hope that he was sitting there watching it the same way that I was. So that when I went, he went, yes. And there was some like synergy in the universe there. But yeah, I bet he is excited. Thank you for pointing that out. So let's talk about some game environments. Let's kind of just dig in. We're gonna we're gonna go through this thing. We're gonna take a look at it on the fly a little bit. Not completely on, it's not that I haven't scratched the surface of this thing, but I just don't have again this guy ran one route in week 3 kind of details on this one. We can always look up anything that we feel might be relevant. But the stacks board, this is up in the groups article. Groups will be updated overnight. Any relevant changes, anything like that. Right now, some really obvious spots, and it's a week with some really disgusting, ugly, terrible stacking spots. We'll look at the Vegas board in a sec, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of weight on these good teams up at the top. It's probably going to stop like in this territory, maybe get to these guys, and a lot less in a lot of these games down here, which is totally justified the way this week looks. Some terrible backup quarterbacks in play. One of the lowest totals in the last 20 years in the NFL in play. Just some really ugly football potentially. A couple really big point spreads too to keep in mind. So this one could go really, really pear-shaped. But right now on points, Miami sitting at the top, probably to no one's surprise. 4th by FanDuel value, 11th by DK value points per dollar. San Francisco and their excellent offense and all those weapons. 2nd on both sites, a little bit better points per dollar on both sites. Detroit looks fantastic to me. 1st by points per dollar on FanDuel, 3rd by overall points, 3rd and 4th on the DraftKings slate. Jared Goff drawing a really nice projection at the top of the board. People were asking about Chicago in the Discord. They rank out well points per dollar, 5th on the DraftKings slate, 8th on the FanDuel slate. But overall as a stack, just given the kind of limited nature of the weapons outside of Justin Fields and DJ Moore, I don't really love how the stack itself comes together. I think Justin Fields, DJ Moore, maybe Colt Met in there. It's the 4th man that kind of drags down their averages compared to some of these other guys. If they had a better 4th man, they'd be landing up in this territory at least a little bit more. But I don't love that Chicago spot this week. I like Washington on both sides of the ball against the Giants. I think the Giants are completely unplayable. You can grab a couple individual plays, some Saquon, fine. But yeah, there's no reason in the universe to stack the Giants this week. That passing game is just, might as well be you or me out there. Could be trying to say, damn, that's a bad beat. Yeah, it's definitely one for the bad beat book. That's for sure. But like I said, you take it off of them over time. They don't ring as painfully, I guess. It's just more fun. Like, how's this going to happen? It's funny too. I did say just as I was watching the scores go up with my lineup, and I didn't have anybody from that very, very last game. I had KD. My lineup ended with Kevin Durant and a couple other people from that Phoenix game. Booker was in it. Whoever else. So I was watching it and I was like, I kind of want to get to 400. I want to crack 400, and it ended at 399.7. And sure enough, I lost to somebody who scored 400.2. Lost by 0.5. But it was like, I need that. I know I'm going to need that one more point. I want 400 here. And we didn't get it. So Washington, again, I do think is definitely a playable stack here. I like how Brian Robinson looks as a running back. He was projecting out really well. I actually put a little thumb on the scale because it's just a little out of line. So we've got him about, I think, where he should be. I think the passing game there could definitely succeed. I just think that they're going to light up the Giants, and there's not going to be really much need to keep the pedal to the metal for the passing game. So I do think that part of it maybe bodes well for Brian Robinson. Chargers kind of obvious. Dallas extremely, extremely obvious. Just up and down the board, the depth chart. Top 3 teams look really good. Jacksonville, I just like how their skill players fall. Can't really stop them from projecting well. Good matchup against Tennessee. This game I like a lot on both sides, Houston and Arizona. I'm going to just have a ton of this game, I think. I like some pieces as individuals. I like the stacks on both sides. Kyler coming back really changes that Arizona offense. So I really like how they look. 8th on FanDuel by points, 5th by point per dollar, 8th and 1st, 21.5 for the entire stack, for the four-man group that I put in here, which was, if I'm remembering correctly, it would have been Kyler, Connor, Brown, and McBride. You could swap out Connor for Rondale Moore or Michael Wilson in your calculation. You lose a little bit in terms of the fantasy point average, but you would gain in terms of points per dollar. It's just a great value spot on the DraftKings slate. Great value spot on FanDuel too. Already top value spot on the DraftKings board. And then Houston just looks good. Nico Collins coming back. Devin Singletary focused backfield. He's the highest owned player. I don't know that I love that. Not somebody who completely makes me comfortable in terms of how many times we've gone bust with Devin Singletary before. But for 5,300, 6,500, the value pricing is kind of undeniable on him this week. So that's one we'll have to take a look at. But I really do like the game environment there. Buffalo doesn't project great for me. Not great points per dollar, not great overall. I like that Jets defense. I think overall they've been kind of underrated all through the season, and they've put up some really good games against good teams. Buffalo's had their ups and downs. They're still a very, very good high-scoring offense, but just fired the offensive coordinator. All the issues going on there. This is one that I could totally see coming through and being a great stack. I mean, it's Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. It's really all you need, and they've obviously got another couple good pieces in there. So that one could surprise. I could see LA and Seattle surprising a little bit. Seattle here, LA here. But kind of looking more like also ran. Just have some, but not a great high priority stack. It's kind of how I land Chicago. And then, nobody down here is anything I really want much of. Cleveland and Pittsburgh with the backup quarterback from Cleveland. And, again, a 33-point total in Vegas. It's a very close point spread. Cleveland favored by 1, but 33. That is literally one of the lowest totals in the last 20 years. So that's not going to be a bonanza of fantasy scoring, I wouldn't think. Dallas and Carolina. Carolina 10.5-point dogs. I do have this on the front page here. Just looking through some of the game environments real quick. One of the reasons I like this one so much is 48.5 points. With two good quarterbacks, a lot of good skill players in this game. Just a very healthy total there. Jets and Buffalo below 40 points. 39.5. Buffalo favored by 7.5. And again, just going up against the capable Jets defense. I feel like this one just gets a little bit more grindy, a little bit, 20 to, it's the Jets, so 20 to 6. I don't really, for whatever reason, see Buffalo getting up and running away with this one. 42 points between Carolina and Dallas, but does anybody really expect Carolina to hold up their end of that at all? 10.5-point underdogs, I could see Dallas just kind of running away with it. Not that we didn't get that and get paid off from it in weeks past. They're obviously content to just let their key starters score and score and score. So it's a good spot on the Dallas side. I just don't know that you get any kind of bringbacks or anything like that I really like. And I don't love the overall idea that Carolina's not going to hang with them. And this total, honestly, for expecting Dallas to kind of go off isn't great. A couple more points on that would be a little bit more compelling, but we'll have tons. It's a great opportunity for Dallas' offense. Don't get me wrong. I am in no way saying don't play Dallas. The 47.5-point total, I'm just landing this more on the Detroit side. Just getting tons and tons of Detroit. They look really good. But again, Justin Fields on his own looks totally solid. One of the highest quarterback projections of the week. DJ Moore looks great. Cole Kmet is fine. It's just that third option. Khalil Herbert coming back, so now you get a little bit of a split three-headed backfield. Darnell Mooney, not a great option. Tyler Scott, so not much to work with after the top options there in the passing game. So that's kind of why they just dip a little bit overall. This is your quarterback for Cleveland, Dorian Thompson-Robins. Going to be a hell of a thing. Again, a 33-point total, just nothing to like in that game at all on either side, really. I'll be surprised if I come up with much of anything from that game. Maybe some individual Amari Cooper. maybe some individual Jalen Warren getting the starting overall nod, but going up against a capable defense. Deontay I like, George Pickens I like as just individuals kind of in a vacuum, but not really in this game environment, and really not with Kenny Pickett throwing to them most of the time. Detroit, like I said, most of the 47 points really landing firmly on the Detroit side. Jared Goff, monster projection. Amon-Ra projecting like a quarterback on the DraftKings slate. Gibbs and David Montgomery found a way to share a lot of points last week. We've got it kind of projected in a similar way. Samuel Laporta picking up a ton. Capable down the board guys too. Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, Khalif Raymond. All three of those guys, any one of them could hit the board. All two out of the three of them could hit the board. I actually like the Packers passing attack a little bit this week. Just going up against that wide open Chargers defense, why not? 31st ranked, 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Jordan Love demonstrably can throw touchdowns at least. Hasn't been my favorite quarterback most of the season. I have not really talked about Jordan Love in glowing terms all season, but they actually look pretty decent here. Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, Daubs, Musgrave. I like the different components. In a weird week, going up against a really bad defense has them looking pretty good. That said, Chargers on the other side of that one, I like that a lot. Touched on this one, just the high total. Great weapons for C.J. Stroud. Singletary is the biggest question mark to me, just because, especially with how high owned he is. Just 40 points here between Tennessee and Jacksonville. It's another one, 7-point spread. I could see it just being a comfy win for Jacksonville where they don't really get carried away. Haven't really had the monster games out of them, just a lot of really good, capable games, which is sometimes enough. I should probably give it a little more information than just Lawrence. But like Lawrence, the high point all season is 2 touchdowns. 315 yards in week 5, the passing high point. 292 yards in week 8. Outside of that, the yards per pass attempt has been kind of limited overall. The touchdowns have been kind of limited overall. I do like the team. I do like all the skill players. You got to like the matchup for passing. 7.2 yards per pass attempt, 27th ranked. It's just, can this finally be the week that these guys arrive all at once as a group and the whole stack pays off nicely? But got to love the skill players between Etienne, Ridley, Kirk, Ingram, Zay Jones. Really like the options there. This one looks really strong, just on the basis of who these guys are. That said, it is a good passing defense on the other side. 8th ranked, 6.1 yards per pass attempt. But with Herbert, with the weapons here, I like that a lot. I really like Jalen Guyton for 3,300 in a points per dollar sense on the DraftKings slate. That looks like a little stick of dynamite right there. What's Guyton done over the last couple of weeks? We'll get into game by game and get more specific rather than all the scattershot approach that I'm doing here. Oh, he is questionable with a groin, so keep an eye on the injury issue. Picked up a groin issue in practice, late edition, after a limited practice on Friday. That's annoying. So he got in the end zone the last week. 4 catches, 41 yards. Targeted 6 times. Anything approaching that kind of a game would be fantastic at price. Quentin Johnston picking up a little bit more of a projection for a little bit more money. Also looks like a good option. Donald Parham Jr. as the lead tight end, I think is a good piece of value on both sides, 31.51. We saw him have a 3-touchdown game early in the season. Stafford just looks like Stafford. Him and his top 2 weapons. Totally playable on any given slate. Seahawks, though, have been fairly good in terms of their defense. 11th ranked, 6.3 yards per pass attempt. I didn't load the quarterbacks into that one. That's the only one I really want to. What is this? DraftKings points now. Yeah, so the Seahawks, 6.3 yards per attempt, with 238 yards a game. They've given up 12 touchdown passes on the season. Puts them about the middle of the board in terms of touchdowns allowed. 7.3 yard defensive ADOT. Generate pressure 23% of the time. 30 sacks. One of the higher sack totals on the board. So, just again, a situation for the Rams where it's like they're just looking like exactly who they are between Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua. And outside of those guys, there's not a ton of appeal. I prefer the Seattle side of that game, I think. Seattle will be going up against a 22nd ranked passing defense, 6.8 yards per attempt. Also 4.2 yards per rush attempt, ranks 20th. So, a little bit of upside there for the Seattle side. That's another one, though, that I feel like hasn't really paid off that great this year. Aiden O'Connell and the Aiden O'Connell-led Raiders going up against Miami. Are they going to do enough to stay in this game? You sure hope so, because we're going to have tons of Miami, I think. 45.5 point total, a lot of it landing on Miami's side. 13-point spread. But there's some playable point totals here. O'Connell himself is just okay, but Jacoby Myers looks good. Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs obviously look very, very good. So it's just a situation where these three skill players may carry this quarterback to okay results. And they're going to need to obviously to keep up with Miami. But for this full game to pay off in we grabbed two pieces of Miami and we grabbed a piece from this side kind of a sense. I do think you want bringbacks from the Raiders side of this one, though. Adams and Jacobs and Myers are high-end enough skill players that you probably want in a fair number of your Miami stacks to use those guys as bringbacks. Because for Miami to really, truly deliver at the very top of what we want from them, Las Vegas is going to have to stay in that game. And it's not going to be the DeAndre Carters and the Trey Tuckers of the world to keep them in that game. Miami right here on the other side, looking great. Tyreek Hill, I think the highest overall projection on the DraftKings slate. Projects higher than the quarterbacks. Priced higher than the quarterbacks, justifiably. Just looks awesome. Jalen Waddle looks awesome. Devon Achane coming back, looks very, very strong. Raheem Mostert. I'm going to take a look, see if maybe we want to chop this a little bit better. Both guys looking very, very good right now. Obviously, we've seen both guys deliver. Braxton Berrios, Ed Wilson, Jeff Wilson, Durham Smythe. Everybody down board looks a lot less relevant than the four skill players up at the top. You don't want to just completely, especially in large field tournaments, focus on only these four guys and to the exclusion completely of these two, and to a lesser extent the tight end. But if you did that, I wouldn't tell you were completely crazy. That is where most of the offense is going to come from. Giants, again, just completely unplayable. You can play some Saquon on his own. I would not play a Tommy DeVito stack. I would not play Tommy DeVito plus Slayton, Wandale, Jalen Hyatt, any of these guys. Even on their own, like they're very, very cheap on the DraftKings slate. So maybe if you need a total dart throw receiver, Darius Slayton goes in at 3,200. Wandale goes in at 35. I don't even know, even at 3,000, I don't even know if I can justify Jalen Hyatt with this quarterback. If it was Tyrod back there, fire away. We'd be talking about an okay value stack. Tommy DeVito has shown me nothing to prove that he's not just a story for the Bergen record, like I said last week. Maybe some individual Giants, but it's not pretty. Daniel Bellinger for 3,000 on DraftKings as a tight end. It's not pretty. Just might be a cheapo, like NBA style building block at that point because he's going to be out there, but he's not going to be that targeted, and his quarterback sucks. So what are we talking about? 2 catches? It's not good. Don't stack the Giants. The Jets a little bit more playable. Zach Wilson's shown minor signs of life from time to time. The Bills' defense hasn't really been anything to write home about. 29th against the run, 18th against the pass, 4.6 yards, 6.6 yards per attempt. Not saying Wilson's good, not projecting him like a good quarterback. He's cheap. He's got very good weapons in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. The downstream options aren't great. Alan Lazard's okay, especially at price. Tyler Conklin's good at price. Nothing else down this way is all that appealing. But on the very top end, I think you could maybe get to some Jets. Not that it's supported by anything in the game total or the spread or anything like that. I'm talking about a couple of shares. And they're much, much better as Breece Hall as an individual, Breece Hall on the other side of Buffalo stacks, Garrett Wilson as an individual, Garrett Wilson on the other side of Buffalo stacks. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, just no, again, on both sides. It's just really weak. Maybe some individual on these three guys. Outside of that, I'm really disinterested. 33-point total going up against the 9th-ranked rush defense, 4th-ranked pass defense, 3.8 and 5.8 yards per attempt. Just doesn't look good. Jaylen Warren was declared the overall starter now. Maybe I give him another point of what Najee has here. But, yeah, again, really not a good spot, not a good game environment, terrible total. Doesn't look right. This one I talked about when I was talking about, excuse me, when I was talking about the LA side. But again, very healthy total, close enough point spread. This is the side I like better. You do have, what is it, it's Metcalf this time that's banged up. One of their receivers is banged up, right? Or more. Let's just go to the team page. Lockett's banged up, okay. So it's a hamstring for Lockett. Limited practice on Friday, missed practice Wednesday and Thursday. These guys tend to just go. Like, they tend to be ouchy during the week and then play on Sunday, Metcalf and Lockett. So I assume full go. If we hear any news, that'll change. You'll get an uptick from Metcalf if Lockett doesn't go. You get a bit of an uptick for Jackson Smith and Jigba because he'll run a little bit further away from the line of scrimmage. That's been his main issue, is just the low ADOT when they target him. I don't love the three-headed tight end situation for Seattle. Fant, Disley, Parkinson, everybody gets a little bit of action. Fant projects the best, but I don't really like going to that. San Fran, just, what can you say? Just monster skill players. McCaffrey, Samuel, Ayuk, Kittle, all four of those guys look good. It's another situation where Brock Purdy on his own doesn't really deserve that, but these guys are so good that it's going to carry him to that projection or thereabout on the right week. And they've got a fairly good matchup for passing. 26th ranked, 7.1 yards per pass attempt. Going to have at least some of the skill players, and I think the stack is definitely playable, ranked as one of them, one of the top, second overall. So yeah, I'd call that a playable stack. I got to get over my Brock Purdy dislike, I think, just with how good these guys are around him. And Tampa's got enough that I think they stay in this. This spread, it's not unjustifiable by any means. I'm sure it's perfectly good. But on a feelsy kind of a sense, I don't know. I feel like Tampa hangs a little bit with that spread. Baker's been serviceable enough. They've got really good weapons in Mike Evans, Rashad White, Chris Godwin. They're going up against the 7.1 yards per, 5.8 yards per pass attempt. My eyes jumped. I was like, wait a minute, that's not San Francisco. They're going up against a 5.8 yards per pass attempt defense, 5th ranked. A little bit more on the ground, 4.0 yards per rush attempt, 13th ranked. But I feel like, put a couple touchdowns on the board for me. Give me a bunch of little dump out passes to Rashad White, let him rack up some yardage. Give me a Godwin touchdown and an Evans touchdown. Hang in the game with 14, 17, 20 points. That does enough to push these San Francisco skill players up the board for me and make them pay off those salaries. I do not love the Tennessee side. DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry totally fine on their own. Getting to Will Levis stacks with them. Let's not do that to ourselves again this week. 20th ranked, 6.6 yards per pass attempt for Jacksonville. Maybe a little bit more as bring back plays on the other side of Jacksonville stacks. But I don't know that we love it at Levis this week. Howell against the Giants and anything Washington looks fine. Like I said, Brian Robinson, especially for the money, looks like a pretty good back this week for me. Terry McLaurin, John Dotson, Logan Thomas, to a lesser extent even Curtis Samuel. I think very, very good options down the board. Diami Brown gets himself in the end zone from time to time. I think he did last week if I remember correctly. Pretty sure I remember seeing Diami get in the end zone. Unless that was the one that got called back. Nope, got in the end zone. 2 of 2 for 41 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, Even downboard guys like that for 3,000, you can take that shot again. Byron Pringle less so, but similar option. So it's a really ugly slate. I do think there's some good spots. There's some very clear, like, super high-end spots. Get into a little bit more of the individual stuff here. Talked about really liking this one. I think this one makes just a ton of sense to get to both sides of. Both quarterbacks look really good. C.J. Stroud is, stepped into the league as one of the top, 8 quarterbacks in football. Already getting MVP chatter, apparently. Jake says Stroud is going to eat the Cardinals barbecue chicken. Trey agrees. Trey likes Brian Robinson a lot. Nice. T-Law in Jacksonville is interesting at the price point, but he never has to do enough. Yeah, that's been the thing all season, right? They haven't been bad. It's just they haven't had to really mash, and he hasn't done it. I read off the two touchdown peak. Is Robinson that crazy popular? Let me see. I mean, overall, I don't really sweat individual player ownership all that much. It's more about the stack, the combinations, and there are so many sheer combinations in NFL, even when you're purely stacking, that I don't really sweat it. That said, he's one of the higher overall players, 15-ish%, let's call it, across sites. I don't think that's prohibitive ownership by any means. Even if it crept up into the 20 range, not going up against this Giants defense. So I think there's plenty of room for even at that ownership for Brian Robinson. And again, I just don't really sweat that individual ownership. Trey like Stroud, Dak, Tua, Goff, Howell, Fields, and Purdy. I'm definitely with you on Stroud, Dak, Tua, Goff. Howell I like. Purdy just again comes along for the ride. Fields, I don't know. I'm back and forth. I definitely think Fields could have a monster. He projects out great. It's just I don't love attacking the Lions. Pretty good front for the Lions. Just, doesn't feel like the right spot for Fields for whatever reason. Did he face them earlier in the season? He did not. This is the first time they're squaring off this year. Yeah, I mean, look, it's Justin Fields, right? He goes out, he has a day like he did against Denver, 335 yards and 4 TDs with an interception, and he only ran for 4 times for 25 yards in that one. But against Washington the following week, 282 and another 4 touchdowns. Ran 11 times for 57 in that one. Hasn't been over 60 yards. Has only run 1 touchdown in so far this year. 3 weeks in the beginning of the season, the first 3 weeks, only a touchdown a week. Less than 216 yards or less. We know the Fields can go out there and have his clunkers. First game back, going up against a capable defense. That's one I'm just kind of shaky on. I'm not sure if the field is going to get carried away on Fields. It might be one where I give a little back and just end up under. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in the above-below column, Brian Robinson, even as a popular play, is probably going to land in my above side. And Justin Fields, even as a good play, might land in my below side. We'll see. Haven't written it yet. Haven't thought about it yet. So, on the Arizona side of this one, Kyler Murray going up against a defense that's generated 21 sacks, 25.9% pressure. But Kyler isn't going to sweat that. He's got escapability. He's seen it all before, so I'm not really worried. That said, 7 yards per pass attempt, good. 246 yards per game, good. But only 9 touchdowns allowed on the season so far. So Kyler's going to have to get creative out there, get his work done. But I have no issues going to that. I like both sides of this one. In his one game back, he threw the ball 32 times, 249 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown pass. Did scramble 6 times, 33 yards. Ran one in, 5.5 yards per rush attempt. CJ's got 2 rushing touchdowns, but not really the focus here. Focus for him is on the passing side of things. 35 pass attempts a game. Throwing for nearly 300 yards a game on the season. 15 touchdowns. And spectacularly just 2 interceptions. 8.3 yards per pass attempt. 5.1 air yards per attempt. It's just been fantastic all season. Really strong weapons to work with. I like the James Conner part of the bargain here. Conner is in his return 63% of the snaps. Overall for the season, 5.2 yards per rush attempt, 14 attempts per game, 60 yards, 3.6 yards before contact, 1.6 after, 2 touchdowns in the limited sample. Marquise Brown, lead route runner, just 4 targets last week, averages 8.1. I would expect a target uptick. Trey McBride maintained targets last week, 9 in last week's game. On the season, 4.9, but he's picked up a ton since Zach Ertz went out. So this is right about what he's averaged over the last handful of games. Rondale Moore targeted 8 times. That's an uptick. Uptick for Michael Wilson from 4.3 to 6. So maybe a little bit of underrated action for Rondale. He's also touched the ball on the ground a few times. Rondale didn't carry the ball last week. Leading up to that, though, he had 4 carries in week 9, 2 in week 8, 4 in week 7. Just kind of gadget plays, no, 1 touchdown on the ground, 3 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown in week 3, going way back. A lot of just, handful of yardage kind of in and around gadget play type things. But the potential for additional touches is always nice. Season high 5 catches on the 8 targets last week. So if Kyler's getting Rondale a little bit more involved, that's another dynamic player. It just shows what his return kind of stretches this offense overall. So I like that side of things. On the Houston side, as mentioned, Devin Singletary going to be the lead back here. 65% of the snaps last week. Let me pull up his last week numbers. Carried the ball 30 times for 150 yards and a touchdown. I think we're all safe in assuming that is basically the Devin Singletary ceiling game. Right? We've all played Devin Singletary enough times to know that this is going to probably go south. He is, as of the last update I saw on ownership anyway, the highest owned player on the FanDuel slate and the highest owned player on the DraftKings slate. As I said, I don't sweat individual ownership. And even with this, he's highly owned because he's a good play. And NFL really does work that way. Good chalk is good chalk. You're going to want to have it. Do I undercut a 30% ownership share? I might. I might take 20%, spread it out to one of the other, running backs from the other 21 teams on this slate. I just don't really have a ton of trust for Devin Singletary. 3.9 yards per rush attempt on the season, 10 carries a game, 51 yards. Touchdown on the season, 2.4 yards before contact, 1.5 yards after contact. I'm just kind of into the passing game from this team. It's what they focus on. It's what they do. Devin Singletary carried the ball 30 times last week, so I can't say that's what they focus on. That's what they do in the face of that directly. But I think there's going to be support for throwing the ball at a consistently high volume here. Last week, with no Nico, Tank Dell drew 14 targets. He averages 7-1. They spread the ball pretty evenly between these guys. Nico's expected back. He's got excellent upside. Dalton Schultz, 6 targets last week. A frequent target for them in the red zone. Schultz practiced in full on Thursday. He's dealing with a hammy, it looks like, but seems totally fine. Last week, 4 catches for 71 yards. Wasn't targeted in the red zone last week. Week before, big 10 catches for 130 and a touchdown. 3 targets in the red zone that week. Week 8 at Carolina, he was not good. Just 2 catches on 5 targets. No looks in the red zone. Had a bye before that. But then 3 weeks in a row before that, weeks 4 through 6, touchdown each week, fair target volume each week, target in the red zone each week. He had a target in the red zone at least once in every game from weeks 1 through week 6. So just a really frequent contributor. One of my favorite tight ends in DFS. We've talked about him all year. Him and Ferguson really have been my 2 go-to tight ends that really draw a lot of looks, draw a lot of important targets, and don't really draw a ton of pricing. So I like that spot. I think he's very interesting. Robert Woods, assuming he's back. Did Woods play last week? Woods did play last week, that's right. Get mixed up a little bit between who was questionable, who played. Woods drew 3 targets last week. Came into this one questionable, ran 26 routes, drew 3 targets. 6.6 target average. He also has been drawing a lot of targets in the red zone for this team. Oh shit, I was supposed to check the NBA news. Sunday. I'm just seeing an underdog tweet. Apparently the Heat were beating the Bulls 20-1 with 5:48 left in the first. That's not great. Their comment was, "This is fine." I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything for our NBA projections or my own swaps. Nope. Looks like we're good. Okay. Let me close. Nope. Need that still. I'll get back to this. Hold on. Find what I was looking at. There we go. So, Robert Woods. In weeks 4, 5, and 6, had at least 1 red zone target. Had 2 red zone targets out of his 3 overall targets last week. Bye week in week 7, didn't play weeks 8 or 9. 3 targets in the red zone in week 2. So the only weeks of the season that he's played and not drawn a red zone target were week 3, where he was targeted 6 times, caught 3 of them for 34 yards, and week 1, where he caught 6 of 10 for 57 yards. He's been a frequent contributor for this team, and kind of, I don't want to say completely forgotten man, but for 37.51, there's a good amount of value here. If you can't pay for Tank Dell, Nico Collins, grab some Robert Woods. That's a good option. Full practice on Thursday. No injury designation. Seems totally fine. Really like the down depth chart option here. He projects out great too. I mean, it's not like he's really hiding in the projections. Projects the same as Dalton Schultz. John Mechie only in an injury situation. Really, none of these guys down the board here matter at all. These guys just kind of come out of player pools, unless Dario Agbonwale is kicking field goals, of course. Nobody on the Arizona side. Like, you're not really looking for any Jeff Swaim. Maybe if it was a showdown slate, we could look to like Greg Dortch, Jeff Swaim. No love for those guys. What was Dortch's high point? What did he draw? Looks like he was untargeted last week. No route run data. Just 1 snap with the offense last week. Ran a route, didn't get targeted. Ran 11 routes the week before, got targeted once, caught it for 2 yards. Those are his only 2 yards and his only catch all season. I don't think we played any Greg Dortch. Probably cut his projection a little bit. Let's give him one of these. So, like I said, I mean, these guys basically come out of the player pool anyway, but that one is a little dangerous, especially if I leave them over 2 on DraftKings. I don't want people who are saying, all right, I'll cut everybody out that's 2 points or less, leaving him in necessarily when he shouldn't be there. So that's why these shows are valuable. They help me find these little things that I need tweaks on. It's easy for like basketball when you get the straightforward rotations, everything minutes based. But for football, it gets a little bit more difficult with these longer lists of players. Once you get down to these type guys and the .5 type guys and the Tony Joneses who shouldn't even be here of the world, the eyes start to glaze over as you're just looking at like, all right, should that be 1.5 or 0.5? So helps me find some of these. So I think that's this game, up and down. Really like the spot. Again, you can see the stack rankings right here. 8th by points on DK, 8th by points on FanDuel, 1st by value on DK, 5th by value on FanDuel for Arizona, 7th and 8th on DK, 7th and 10th on FanDuel for the Houston side. So they project right next to each other in terms of points. A little bit of a discrepancy by points per dollar value. That's just because Arizona's so cheap, but I really like both options. Can't find you guys. Where are you? That's on. Lost your tab. What's up, Sam? How come FanDuel's customer base faces constant issues when contacting customer service on the support lines? Either great informative, insightful content, awesome DFS. Thank you. I'd be happy to go fix FanDuel's customer support like I've done other places. Yeah, they'd have to pay me a pretty penny because they're a mess. I used to have, as a high volume player, let's say, you're supposed to have like a dedicated customer service rep. I think I've mentioned this before. Had one for a while. It was great. A couple times a week, he'd be like, yo, if you buy into this one twice, I'll give you the third one for free. For every 2 that you buy, I'll give you the third one for free. Here's a free entry to this. Here's a free entry to that. Got great stuff. Never got like, hey, here's sideline tickets for this game or anything. I think those things are available if you ask. Literally haven't heard from him since before COVID. So I hope he's okay. I assume he just left that job. But I just got lost somewhere in the shuffle, and I've asked a few times. I've been like, hey, I used to have a dedicated rep. Do you guys like not do that anymore? Do you not care about me? What's up, FanDuel? One of your biggest fans out here. One of your only supporters in the industry. One of the only people in the industry who likes talking about your site. That's all right. I don't need any kind of dedicated customer support or anything. It's cool. Yeah, for customer support, for rewards programs, things like that, DK seems a lot better. That is the one thing I will give DK. It's just, I've never really chased the rewards, the points programs and those kinds of things. Probably to my own detriment. But that's one of the reasons I never really cared to switch. But I don't think there's much contest between the two. But I have no idea why they're so bad at it, Sam. It's not the hardest thing in the world. Simple ticketing system and a couple people with some well-written canned responses can get you very far. And then you have 2 good people on staff who know how to talk to people. You're probably fine. Empower them to give refunds and stuff. You're probably fine. Jody, what's going on, Jody? Jody's finally settling in till kickoff. Love it. 8:52, we've got a ways to go. We got to keep the pedal down. I was threatening a 2-hour show. We're going to try and still hit that goal. This one, good projections on both sides. No arguing with the quarterback projection for Justin Fields. Looks dynamite at the top of the board. I really like DJ Moore paired with him. $5,600 on DraftKings is a very good price. $6,800 on the FanDuel slate. Did I load up the... I didn't. I didn't load up the individual rankings. They're on the site, though. Let's look where DJ Moore ranks. DJ ranks 18th by points on FanDuel, 16th by points per dollar on DraftKings, 19th by points, and 15th by points per dollar at the wide receiver position. So a very strong option. I was actually expecting him to look a little bit better points per dollar on DraftKings. Kind of surprised it was only 15th. I thought he'd be top 10. But a very strong play, and I think for every 3 shares of Justin Fields you probably have 1 3/4 shares of DJ Moore. You have a lot of DJ Moore with your Justin Fields is my point. You get a lot of Cole Kmet as well. Strongly projected tight end option. 10 plus on DraftKings on the back of some catches. 4,100, good price for him. Cole Kmet ranks 8th on both sites by points, 5th by FanDuel points per dollar, 4th by DraftKings points per dollar. So between the two, if I actually had to say which one is the better just DFS play of it, it might be Cole Kmet alongside Justin Fields. Somebody asked in the Discord earlier today about if we were worried about the target share, and I don't think so. In the games that Fields played early in the season, Kmet had a 7-target game in there. He had a 9-target game in there. 6 targets in week 2, 7 targets week 1, 9 targets week 4. So the uptick in production, over the last few weeks when Fields wasn't here, there's a little bit. He had 10, 8, and 7 targets. So it is a little bit of an uptick, but it's not that it's something that Justin Fields wouldn't or couldn't sustain by any means. Could just be a systemic uptick of, well, our wide receivers kind of suck outside of DJ, so let's throw it to our pretty good tight end. Also, just, kind of the idea of the Donta Foreman, Rashawn Johnson backfield that they've had the last few weeks. Khalil Herbert stepping back in. Going to make this a little bit messy. Full practices, 5 of 6 practices since being designated to return. When last we saw him, 10 carries in week 5 for 76 yards. The week before that, he had 18 carries for 103. That was his best game of the year. Also caught 4 passes that week for 19 yards and a touchdown. That was alongside Fields going. That was the big 335-yard, 4-touchdown game for Justin Fields. That was against Denver again. Let's keep that in mind. But Khalil Herbert, pretty good running back, just hasn't played in the last 5 games. And now we've got Foreman to deal with. This is where it's better if I have this before ahead of time. Foreman carried the ball 21 times last week, 20 times the week before. Just 2 targets last week, 0 the week before that, 2 the week before that. He was limited at practice with an ankle. Practiced 3 times during the week. Seems like he's going to play, but listed as questionable. It could be a situation where it's just, hey, Donta, thank you for the hard work while Khalil was out, but he and Rashawn Johnson will take it this week. Go get some rest. I kind of hope that it goes that way so it just becomes a little bit more clear-cut. Rashawn Johnson last week, 5 carries for 18 yards, also caught 4 of 6 targets, 18 routes run. Ran 18 routes last week, 12 the week before, 13 the week before that. In the early part of the season, he had 5 carries, 13 yards, caught 1 of 1 targets in that week 4 against Denver, a.k.a. Khalil Herbert's best week. Week 3, he had 8 carries for 38, 4 carries for 32 in week 2, 5 carries in week 1, targeted 7 times in week 1. Khalil Herbert was targeted 5 times in week 1. So they were kind of not like a 50-50, one for you, one for me kind of a split the first few weeks of the season, but it was somewhat close to that. Then week 4, Herbert took a big step forward, kind of took over. Johnson just hasn't really been all that good. And the fact that he didn't go out there and seize the job and it was mostly Foreman the last couple weeks bodes well for it to just be, Khalil Herbert, Donta Foreman if he plays, or just a bigger workload for Khalil Herbert. I don't think we get too much intrusion from Rashawn Johnson. I hope. With all of that in mind, they're going up against a 4th-ranked 3.7 yards per rush attempt defense. So, I kind of prefer the passing game on the Chicago side. Limited though it may be to two good receivers, and then Darnell Mooney, Tyler Scott. Mooney and Scott the last couple times out. Last week, Scott 1 target on 11 routes run. He runs an average of 12. Mooney runs an average of 26. Targeted an average of about 4 times. Was targeted 4 times last week. He was basically exactly who he is last week. For the season, 8.4 yards per target, a 10.3 yard ADOT, 1 touchdown on the season. A little bit of a depth threat, if nothing else, but not really the home run play that we're looking for. outside of those guys, if it was a showdown slate, maybe get into some of the Robert Tonyans of the world, the Equanimous St. Browns. I don't think Equanimous did anything last week, right? 15 routes run, 1 target. ESB versus Tyler Scott is an interesting discussion, I guess. Interesting in that they each were targeted once last week on a handful of routes run. So, translation not interesting. But interesting in terms of if you want to get really down into the nitty-gritty about which one of those $3,000 receivers might be better. Maybe ESB should actually be eking out over Tyler Scott here. I don't think it matters. I don't think you want defenses on either side of this one. Just thinking through Bears 2,400, 3,200, 4 and change points. Lions 3,800, 4,400. If I'm taking a D, I'm taking the Lions side of it. If you shut down Justin Fields as a rusher, which I do think that front has a good chance to do, and just against the run, they're allowing just 3.2 yards per rush attempt. That ranks first overall. 3.7 yards per rush attempt. That ranks 4th overall. One of these days, after all this time, I will get this right on the first try, which one of these lines I'm supposed to be reading. But a good front that is good at limiting the run. If you take that away from Fields, there's the potential that they have a decent day. If they create a turnover, potential for them to have a decent day. Definitely potential for them to rack up a handful of sacks. So to just put like a 4 or 5 point total on the board that won't get too rung up if there's some scoring. 2-2 Rangers Devils, by the way, in the third. But overall, I think we're going to this game for offense. I think that's pretty clear with a 47-point total, 8-point spread. In the running backs last week, let me get to the depth chart page here. That's just easier to click from there. Come on. So we've got Gibbs, we've got Montgomery. I favored Montgomery last week. I think we're going to favor Gibbs this week a little bit. Monty came back 12 carries, 116 yards and a touchdown. Gibbs, 14 carries, 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. Week before that, 26 for 152 and a touchdown for Gibbs. Montgomery obviously didn't play the 2 weeks before their bye. It's very, very close. There's obviously potential for both of them to score a couple of touchdowns. It takes away from the passing game if they're scoring the touchdowns. That could get problematic. But there's still enough room for them and one of the receivers to all get there. I just wouldn't load up on I don't think I go both running backs and St. Brown or Laporta. I think I would probably prefer it as one of the running backs and those two if you had to go to a +3. But I don't really like +3s anyway. But like a Gibbs and St. Brown, Montgomery St. Brown, Gibbs Laporta, so on and so forth, I think are great. And then I do like, as I said before, these downstream options here. Josh Reynolds for 37.57. Reasonable enough. Jamison Williams, ton of talent, good size for the cheap price. .22 routes run last week for Josh Reynolds. Averages 26. Targeted 4 times. Jamison targeted just twice. Averaging 3.4 targets. Hasn't really done much with them. But just a high-end kid that they have to want to get going here. So eventually I think these targets go his way a little bit. We see a bit of an uptick. And just any given slate, I do think there's home run potential there. 1 touchdown on the year for him. Josh Reynolds has 3. A 12.1 yard ADOT for Reynolds, a 14.6 yard average depth of target for Jamison Williams. Those are your downfield home run threats in this offense. That said, Amon-Ra is just a volume monster. 7.8 yard ADOT for him, 4 touchdowns on the season. Laporta's also gotten it in 4 times. 7.3 yard ADOT. He's targeted 7 times a game. Amon-Ra's targeted almost 11 times a game. Either one of those two guys is a premium option alongside Jared Goff. $20 touchdowns allowed through the air for Chicago so far this year. 15 touchdowns allowed through the air for Detroit. Chicago allowing basically 250 yards a game. Detroit allowing 231. 21 sacks on the board for Detroit. Just 13 sacks on the board for Chicago. Goff's going to have time. They only gain pressure 16.5% of the time. Just bodes so well for the Detroit passing game. They're throwing the ball 36 times a game. Chicago throws the ball 27 times a game, or Justin Fields does anyway. Goff's throwing for 278 yards a game, 14 touchdowns on the season, 7.7 yards per pass attempt. I really like the Detroit side of this one. Gotta say. What's the ownership look like on these guys? Doesn't look crazy. The fact that I haven't spotted any of them yet. There's Amon-Ra. So Amon-Ra, like mid-teens call it. Laporta outside of double digits in terms of his popularity. I haven't even spotted Goff yet. There's Goff. Goff trending down toward the middle single digits for popularity. That's a stack I can get excited about. Especially if people trend in the other direction and start grabbing some Chicago side. I like this Detroit side. I don't think we get invested in your Brock Wrights, your Antoine Greens, your James Mitchells, your Craig Reynoldses, or on the other side, any of your Mercedeses or Trent Taylors. We talked about ESB. Tanyan, again, not unless it was a showdown slate. I know he's drawn some targets. That said, it's been one each of the last 2 weeks and then not targeted in week 10. 2 targets a week going back earlier in the season. Hasn't scored a touchdown, has just 1 red zone target on the season. So you're trying to thread an extremely, extremely thin needle there. Dallas and Carolina. Big game for offense on one side. Everybody wants to play Bryce Young. Bryce Young, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo stacks, right? That's what everybody wants. I don't think that's going to be the most popular play. Lone Wolf says, I'm watching from behind, but Gibson is doubtful, so Robinson a lock. Yeah, that's even more good info, good reason to lock in Brian Robinson. I forgot about that, or didn't have it at the front of my brain. Let's see, what's the latest on Gibbo? Toe injury. Missed every practice all week. Did I project him active or not? Yeah, I didn't project him active. Okay. That's why it wasn't on my radar that he was doubtful, because I projected him as out. So yeah, that also floats the Robinson idea. But I mean, just throw things at that Giants team. Don't play them. Jody points out if the RBs were cheaper, it would be a great St. Brown pivot. Yeah, that's not untrue about that Detroit offense. And just, I don't, as good as they are, and as much as they proved last time out that they can both get there, I still don't totally love going to even high-end guys in a split situation where I just don't know where the touches are going to go, which one's going to get more, are they going to throw less so they can split the difference and give both of these guys a lot of carries. I just don't like when situations get murky like this. I love the talent here. Honestly, these 4 plus these 2, or these 3, really, is one of the deeper overall fantasy offenses that we've got to work with. Like, Khalif Raymond is not completely unplayable. Targeted 4 times last week, 3 times on average. Runs an average of 13 routes a game. There's a little bit there, 10.3 yards per target. A pretty solid ADOT for him, 8.4 yard ADOT. These guys more downfield option. Khalif Raymond doing, I guess, a little bit more, not completely underneath type work, but a little bit closer to home. But he's playable in large field tournaments? Absolutely. So, yeah, I agree with what you're saying in that if Gibbsy was a little bit less. Montgomery on DK for 65. You could argue that that's a pretty good price. What's his ranking? Let's see. Montgomery, man, just 15-18. 16-20 on FanDuel. Brian Robinson, 4-3 on FanDuel, 8-2 on DraftKings. Might even see him trend up a little bit. So yeah, just really like that Detroit offense on the other side. So I do think that you could consider either one of these guys as reasonable pivots away from Amon-Ra, in a sense that those would be direct leeches for his touchdown equity. With the, where's the tab that I had there? Gibbs is owned at about the same level as Amon-Ra on DraftKings. It's a bigger difference on FanDuel. It's actually a pretty stark difference on FanDuel. He's owned about half as much in these ownership projections that I'm looking at anyway. And then Montgomery ownership is just like a non-factor, low single-digit projections in these projections anyway. So really, if you want that pivot, if you want to do something different from the Detroit side, it looks like it's David Montgomery this week. Not that we're sweating individual ownership, but, you know, mid-ish teens for both of these guys. Samuel Laporte a little less than that, so Montgomery was the clear low-owned guy in that offense. Let's keep on rolling. We can kind of blow through the Carolina side of this one. If you're going to them, you're dealing with a quarterback who's thrown for 195 yards a game, 8 touchdowns in his 8 games, 7 interceptions, 5.4 yards per pass attempt, I believe is the league low, 3.2 air yards per pass attempt. He's going up against a defense that's allowing just 166 yards a game. They've got 26 sacks on the year, 10 interceptions, 22.4% pressure rate. I don't think we're going to Bryce Young here. Whoops. Dak Prescott on the other hand, going up against a team that's allowing just 176 total yards, 6.3 per attempt though. He's throwing the ball 33 times a game. They've allowed 11 touchdowns. He's thrown 17. They gain pressure 19% of the time, just 17 sacks. Going up against the Cowboys' offensive line, think there should be plenty of protection for Dak. Think he's going to have all day to pick them apart, do whatever he wants. 268 yards a game, 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Monstrous numbers for Dak so far this season. He's thrown the ball 56 times in the red zone. Pretty solid total. 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. Capable of running one in any given time. Oops. Much more enthusiastic about the Dallas side of this one, obviously. If we're looking at Chuba Hubbard, just 31 yards a game, 3.7 yards per rush attempt, 10.4 carries a game. Part of this is including the time that he was more in a split. He's taken over the backfield from Miles Sanders overall. I can just not click on the right thing here. In last week's game, Hubbard, just 9 carries, caught 2 of 2 for another 16 yards. Sanders, just 2 carries, 2 catches, 15 yards. It's just not good. Sanders, negative 5 yards, brought in both his targets for 15, so a net of 10 yards. So, like, the lead guy, not good. The guy who's just lost all his volume, significantly worse. Thielen's your high-end skill player here. His upside the last few weeks. No touchdowns since week 6. They had a bye in there in week 7, but no touchdowns the last 3 weeks. Wasn't over 50 yards the last 2 games, 29 yards, then 42 yards, 5 catches, then 6 catches. Had 8 on 11 targets for 72 yards in Week 8 against Houston. 300-yard games on 11 catches in each of those games, 14 targets and then 13 in the other 2. Were all strong. Touchdown in each one of those, plus another touchdown in Week 2. Had a really good stretch there from Week 2 through Week 6. Given the quarterback, given the receiver in question, that might be the peak for Adam Thielen for this season. He's still the easy go-to option if you're going to Bryce Young stacks for whatever reason. If you're a huge Carolina fan, that's your guy. That said, for 7,000, I don't know that he's my favorite receiver option on this slate. I don't know that he's my 10th favorite receiver option. I can tell you he is probably exactly my 20th favorite by fantasy points and 26th favorite by points per dollar on FanDuel. 20th and 52nd on DraftKings. Holy hell. 7,500 on DraftKings is just untenable for Adam Thielen this week. I'll come right out and say it. That is a bad play on DraftKings this week. He could go out and score 2 touchdowns and make the value, but on this side of lock, Adam Thielen is a bad play this week. Nothing really downboard DJ Shark, maybe some, a couple deep looks, but we're not completing deep looks at all in this offense. So why go to the downfield receiver? Just doesn't really make sense. Terrace Marshall, same thing. Blackshear, Tommy Tremble, there's really not much here. Mingo would be your second man in, 3,400, 5,000. Last time out, Mingo. Three catches for 20 yards, 7 targets. 1 catch for 5 yards the week before that on 4 targets. 4 of 5 for 62 in Week 8. That's like your high point on the entire season. They look in his direction. Not the best at actually bringing the ball in. I don't know if he's got... How many drops does he have? No drops on this tab. Drops on here. Nope. Well, regardless, Mingo doesn't catch a lot of the balls thrown in his direction. Probably a little bit of a mix between whose fault that is. But just not a good option going up against Dallas. Dallas allowing just 5.9 yards per pass attempt, ranked 7th. 14 yards on the ground, 4.1 per attempt. Chuba Hubbard's not the guy who's going to tear up this Dallas defense. Dak you have to love. Pollard makes sense for the people saying Tony Pollard week, going up against the defense allowing 4.3 yards per rush attempt, ranks him 24th. But Dak going to be facing a defense giving up 6.3 yards per attempt, that ranks 12th. Not the worst by any means, but definitely not a spot that's going to intimidate him. Definitely a spot I think that they can take clear advantage of. So, damn it, I keep clicking on the wrong spots. We're dealing with an offense with very, very high-end options, and some of the high-end options have been getting it done regularly all season, and one of them really notably has not, and that's Tony Pollard. So do we break the trend? Do we continue going to Tony Pollard? I think it makes sense to have some. I don't know that it's my favorite spot of the week. In our rankings, he's 5th by value on points on FanDuel, but 1st by value. 4th by DK points, 5th by value. You got to like it for the price. You got to like it for the opportunity, for the spot. Coming into the season, if you had shown me a schedule and said, hey, who looks good in Week 11? This would have been like wow, that's going to be a strong spot. What does Tony Pollard have at this point in the season? 10, 12 touchdowns? Closing in on 1,000 yards? Hasn't been that season for Tony Pollard. 2 touchdowns all year. Hasn't been over the 55 yards that he put up on 15 carries against that terrible Giants defense just last week. Hasn't been over that since Week 3, in which he carried the ball 23 times for 122 yards. Hasn't seen nearly that many carries. All right, Week 1, he carried the ball 14 times. Scored both his touchdowns. That was also against the Giants, by the way. Week 2, he carried the ball 25 times, 72 yards. Week 3, 23 carries for 122. And then the rush attempts, the next 6 games, and this is where I get a little bit concerned, have been 11, 8, 15, 12, 12, and 15. He's targeted, so we claw some of that back. We get the touch volume up to 18 to 20. It's fine. But for somebody as high profile and like supposedly high end as he was, at this point I think the gleam is off of it a little bit, but as supposedly high end as he was supposed to be, those aren't the greatest carry numbers in the world. They should be higher. 15 carries last week wasn't targeted last week. That's also problematic. 5 targets the week before is comforting, but only had 12 carries that week. So, yeah, there's definitely upside for Tony Pollard. He also carries the ball in the red zone a fair amount of the time. 4 red zone carries last week, 2 each of the 2 weeks before that, and 2 in the week before the bye. But back at the beginning of the season, again, there's a big difference here. 7 carries in the red zone in week 1, 9 carries in the red zone in week 2, 8 carries in the red zone in week 3. They've clearly changed how they scheme for Tony Pollard carrying the ball by, 20%, 15%, whatever that is. And it's a bit of a downturn overall. Plenty of upside. Plenty of good reason to play Tony Pollard this week. But it comes with a little bit of caution. If he gets crazy popular, where's his numbers right now? Yeah, he's about as popular as you would expect on FanDuel. DraftKings, a little bit less so. DraftKings into the single digits, basically twice as popular on FanDuel. There's a chance that Tony lands in the unders, the below column. Again, the above-below column, if you guys read it, the way that it works is not, I don't want these guys, fade these guys. It is in no way a fade take. But it's just a, hey, this play's going to be really popular. Maybe you want to consider being a little bit under the field on it because we're either behind it or I'm getting this kind of a read on it. That's my takes piece each week. I think Tony might be a candidate for the slightly below part of the crowd. At the same time, Dak, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks, love those options. Love this passing attack, especially if they're going to be under-owned compared to Tony. Like getting CeeDee Lamb, I know it's a big price difference. You're talking about a completely different kind of a play. But getting CeeDee Lamb for 2/3 the ownership of Pollard has a ton of value. Getting Dak at roughly 1/3 the ownership, I like that passing attack, I really do. Obviously, I know that's not groundbreaking to say. They've been incredible all year. CeeDee Lamb out there setting records. Last 4 games for CeeDee, 117 yards, 158 yards, 191 yards, 151 yards. 12, 11, and 11 catches the last 3 weeks. 14, 16, and 14 targets. Just like the highest volume, most talented receiver right now. Going up against a capable but not threatening pass defense. I have no issues with it. What was the actual record that he set? There it is. First player in league history with 3 straight games of at least 10 catches and 150 yards. He's had 4 straight games of 100 yards. 25 yards shy of 1,000 already. Thank you to, what's that? Whose note is that? RotoWire. For as not as great as they are at a lot of things, these RotoWire stat boards are good for the route running numbers. They're the only spot that puts receptions, targets, and routes run just in a very concise, little easy to read, and free space. That said, a lot of their routes information numbers are +1, -1 for whatever reason. But CeeDee, none of that information is incorrect. He is fantastic. Ferguson, like I mentioned before, one of my top tight end options week to week. I really like how much they look in his direction. Last time out, four catches, 26 yards, a touchdown on 7 targets. Week before that, 7 for 91 and a touchdown on 10 targets. Has touchdowns in each of the last 3 games. Frequently targeted in the red zone. Only 2 weeks this season was he not targeted in the red zone. And then out of the games where he was targeted in the red zone, only 2 of those were single targets. Every other game he had at least 2, ceiling of 5, 2 games with 3. They look Ferguson's direction a lot. I like that option. Cooks had a solid game last week as well. Everybody did. Cooks, I believe, led the team in yardage. 173 yards and a touchdown on 9 catches, 10 targets. Just with these kind of performances and with the way that they've been playing, approaching the game this way and throwing it as much as they have been, again, that just kind of that drop down in the game plan for Tony Pollard that has me a little concerned there. I could see CD and Brandon Cooks just having a big game again. I could see Jake Ferguson scoring a touchdown or 2. Cook struggled a little bit to get his season off the ground, but he's come on strong. Touchdown in week 6, touchdown in week 8. Clunker in week 9 at Philly, just 1 of 2 for 7 yards. But some strong games in there. As far as like the downboard guys, the Gallups, Tolberts, Turpinses of the world, there's a little bit of room. Gallup, 2 catches, 70 yards and a touchdown on 2 targets last week. 3 targets each of the weeks before that. 2 catches a game, just 20 yards a game. That's the only touchdown he scored all year. In week 4, he had 60 yards. In week 3, he had 92 yards. There's a little bit of upside there. A little bit of home run potential. Tolbert just 2 catches for 2 yards last week on 5 targets, but the week before targeted 5 times, caught 3 of them for 49 yards and a touchdown. So a little bit of a dart throw kind of an option, but for large field tournaments, I definitely think there's a little bit of room there. Turpin didn't play last week, but fully practiced this week. Yeah, looks like he's good to go. Just 1 target. Yeah, excuse me. Scrolled over by accident. Yeah, one target, caught it for a touchdown on 5 yards in week 9 against Philly. He also returns kicks and punts, so you get a little bit of dynamic upside there. Again, just a large field dart throw. But if you're looking for large field dart throws, I think this Dallas offense has a few to offer here. And then there's the ever-present threat of Deuce Vaughn, who carried the ball 1 time on 5 snaps with the offense last week after not playing for 3 weeks and having a bye in there. And then Rico, who had 12 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. 7 routes run untargeted, 12 routes run the week before untargeted, just 2 carries for 8 yards that week, 5 carries for 18 yards the week before. Questionable ankle injury. Picked it up during the walk-around, apparently. Just with, especially, it's more to pile on the Pollard thing than anything else. It's good that Rico Dowdle's banged up here. Probably takes a little bit of that threat away. But if he were to come out and carry the ball 12 times again, that would be potentially disastrous for Pollard again. So there's reason to sweat with the Pollard play, but it projects out well. Points per dollar-wise, it looks good. No issues with it. I prefer the passing side of this game. Just on virtue of the defense here, I do think Jordan Love's in play. 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Sub 200 yards a game. 11 touchdowns on the season. But the yardage per pass attempt, I think there's plenty to work with here for Jordan Love. He's averaging 6.7 yards per attempt himself. He's thrown 14 touchdowns. He's also thrown 10 interceptions, which isn't great. 9.2 intended air yards per attempt, though. Downfield operator, 33.3 attempts a game. Completing just 59% of them, 223 yards a game. Not ideal. Obviously better numbers on the other side for Justin Herbert. 260 yards a game on nearly 36 passing attempts. 17 touchdowns and just 5 interceptions. Dynamite options to work with in the receiving core. Well, down to one dynamite option and then a couple of also ran types, actually. But Keenan Allen remains a dynamite option, and Austin Eckler is a very, very high-end running back option who can get involved in the passing game. So he's got a lot to work with still, but they are a little bit banged up. But Jalen Guyton, like I said at the top of the show, for $3,300, if he just goes out and has a game like he did last week, there's plenty of value there. Quentin Johnston could get involved on volume alone. $4,200 is a good value price for him. Donald Parham is the lead tight end, so there's some options here. For Green Bay, Aaron Jones came back to 13 carries last week, had 20 the week before for 73 yards and a touchdown. Was targeted 6 times each of the last 2 weeks. Just 2 touchdowns on the season. But it seems like the volume has bounced back the last 2 weeks. It was basically there in the passing game, but the carries in week 7 and 8 were 8 and 7. Then it bounced back to 20, 13 last week. A.J. Dillon last time out, 9 carries the week before, 9 carries. Put up 70 yards last week, just 40 yards the week before that. I don't love that he shaves off a few touches from Aaron Jones, but I don't think it's overly problematic. It's something we've dealt with Aaron Jones. And when Jones is healthy and full go, like it looks like he's kind of worked back up to, I think we've got plenty of upside here. Going up against the Chargers defense that ranks 18th, 4.2 yards per rush attempt allowed so far this season. There's plenty of reason to believe that Aaron Jones on the back of 15 carries-ish and 5-6 targets could make some noise fantasy-wise. I think you leave Aaron Jones in stacks, in the groups so that he gets in the stacks with Jordan Love. I think he's very playable on his own for the price, $62,700. As Trey points out, he's not overly popular, which is always good. Might be a difference of opinion across sites. I'm not sure where you were looking. I have a guess where you were looking, Trey. The source that I use these days has them not unpopular, like low to mid-teens. Very, very playable, though. Again, I just don't care about the individual ownership that much. Yeah, Slim, want to play him, but burnt me a few too many times this year. Yeah, I don't disagree. I've gotten burnt by Aaron Jones a few too many times as well. But especially for like good players, high-end guys like this, who have high individual ceilings, in decent spots, and especially when there's good reason that they didn't really perform earlier in the season because they were hurt, because in some of those weeks they were kind of splitting a job. I like to think that the public gets on that kind of a train of thought, not wanting to play him because how clunky he's been in spots. So if they're going this way, I want to go that way on him, right? It's just the old do the opposite kind of a move. Not always, just look at the field and do the opposite by any means. But on a good play like that, if the field gets away from it, I can go toward it, and vice versa. Especially when he grades out similarly to other guys on the board. You can just look at those as potential pivot points, and it can be different from site to site. 62 on DK is different than 7,000 on FanDuel. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Luke Musgrave, 3 pretty strong targets for Jordan Love stacks. This entire Packers offense, to be honest, has not worked out well for me all season when I go to them. But I think we're going back. Watson, Going back to week 7, 3 catches, 1 catch, 2 catches. Hasn't been over the 37 yards that he put up on 1 catch in week 9. 1 touchdown all season, came on 2 catches in week 4, missed the first 3 weeks. Regularly targeted, still drawing plenty of volume, still running plenty of routes. 3 targets in the red zone last week, didn't come down with him. Just caught 2 of 7 passes. 2 targets in the red zone 2 weeks ago. Romeo Doubs had a touchdown last week. Touchdowns in week 7 and week 8. Didn't get one in week 9, but caught 3 balls for 36 yards. All 3 of his targets. Mid-range target volume. Regular targets in the red zone. Actually scoring touchdowns for this team. I think for 52-63 versus 46-57, seems like Romeo Doubs has actually surpassed Christian Watson. I gotta remember to correct that. I gave it a nudge last week. I gotta remember to actually probably get into the back end and correct those two. Not that we're necessarily wrong on Watson, but the trend has been here, and it should be more reflected in these projections. It'll probably come out to maybe more of a tie, 10-ish each, given where he's at and where he's at. Excuse me. But both are playable options in this offense, and any one of these weeks, Christian Watson could come roaring back to life. Watson did have 7 touchdowns on 41 catches last year, 611 yards. 9.3 yards per target. That was a premium receiver. That's who we were expecting. Hasn't been that guy this year. Luke Musgrave, playable part of tight end. .64 yards on 2 catches last week, 4 targets. Week before that, caught 3 of 4 for 51 yards and a touchdown. It's about the kind of volume that we can expect. Targeted in the red zone each of the last 2 weeks. 4, 5, 6 targets in the red zone overall in 9 games this season. A cheap, playable option at the tight end position. If you're going to this team, I think you can get some Luke Musgrave. Not a guy to necessarily go out of your way for overall. He's playable as an individual, but not a high priority tight end. Jaden Reed, a lot of looks in the red zone through the season for him. Scored a touchdown in week 10. 5 catches for 84 yards. Targeted 5 times, caught all of them for 84 and a touchdown. It's a good game. Caught all 3 of 3 for 19 yards the week before that, but in week 8, caught 4 of 6 for 83 yards. Target in the red zone last week, week 7, and then through the beginning of the season, weeks 2, 3, and 4, had 3, 4, then 2 targets in the red zone. So they've looked his direction a lot. Big-bodied receiver. I don't think we need Dontavian Wicks. Well, actually, maybe we do. 4 targets each of the last 3 weeks. 2 catches for 28 in week 8. 4 catches for 49 in week 9. And 3 catches for 51 last week. Hasn't been in the end zone since week 2. That's his only touchdown all season. Maybe we give Dontavian and get him like above 5 DraftKings points. Maybe. I can give this Packers receiving core another look. Not going to get carried away, I promise. But he maybe deserves another target in consideration here. And then this situation should be addressed and flipped a little bit. But good options. 2 good receivers, very good running back, a playable tight end, at least 1 good downboard receiver with touchdown upside, and then a potentially second good downboard receiver with a little bit of volume. I like the pack. Could be a little sneaky this week. What's their ownership look like as a stack? Poof! We can play that. Low single digits ownership for Jordan Love. That's not the right Watson. Watson will be more popular on DraftKings than FanDuel according to these, but very playable on either one. And Romeo Doubs isn't going to be owned at all. Wow. Interesting. I really am starting to like the idea of some Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs. Interesting. I'm kind of curious why people aren't going to that a little bit more. a good spot. That is definitely an interesting one. Just, again, Green Bay ranks somewhere on this board. Far are they? There they are. 13th by points, 9th by points per dollar on FanDuel, 3rd by points per dollar on DraftKings. Watson's cheap, Doubs is cheap, Musgrave is cheap, Jaden Reed's cheap. That's an interesting stack, guys. Not like top priority stack, but like probably under-owned, deserves some consideration in a really strong spot kind of a stack. I don't know that it should necessarily have Jordan Love projected above Justin Herbert here. But that said, Justin Herbert going up against an 8th-ranked 6.1 yards per pass attempt defense from Green Bay. They've been much worse against the run, 4.2 yards per rush attempt, ranks 18th. Could be Austin Eckler day, but definitely good reasons to play Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen. Like I said, Jalen Guyton just really, really cheap. Oh, Seth, I know Love is terrible, don't get me wrong. All of this accounts for the fact that Love is not good. If you've been here any of the other weeks, I've been mostly shit-talking Love all season long. Just got a couple basketball updates. Sounds like Giannis is having a game. Karl-Anthony Towns, 12 points in the fourth quarter. All right, got some life in these lineups, it looks like. Wow, how did I didn't get to any shares of Wemby? That's weird. Wemby having a game. 15 points, 4 assists, 7 boards, a steal, 4 blocks. That's a solid FanDuel performance. I wonder how I didn't get to him. Strange. This isn't what you guys are here for. All right, I'll look through that later. So let's look at some of the numbers for those downboard receivers for LA. So Johnston is fully healthy. 4 catches, got in the end zone last week. First time in the end zone, 34 yards, targeted 4 times. He's been the guy we've been hoping and expecting to get going. Had 5 catches for 50 yards in week 8 against Chicago, just 2 for 14 in week 9. But hopefully this is, a week to get him a little bit more involved. You got Jalen Guyton, cheap but questionable with a groin. As we touched on at the beginning of the show, picked up a groin injury in Friday practice. Has only played 2 games this season. Saw 2 targets in his first game on 33 snaps, 25 routes run. Didn't catch either one of them. But then last week against Detroit, 53 snaps. Ran 34 routes. Basically a full-time regular receiver. 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 41 yards and a touchdown. That's an involved regular receiver. You can put him behind Quentin Johnston on the depth chart if you want to, but Jalen Guyton, if he's out there, is an interesting option at those prices. If he's limited by the groin injury, obviously, problematic. Keenan Allen dealing with a shoulder injury, obviously a little problematic for him, but he's expected to be out there, should be totally fine. The regular tight end Gerald Everett is out. We've got Donald Parham. Parham draws an interesting enough projection for the money. We do know what the ceiling looks like. 2 touchdowns in week 3. Touchdown in week 1. Another one in week 8. 4 catches that week for 43 yards. There's definitely touchdown equity here at worst. 3 touchdowns in the first 3 games, has 1 since then. That's what I just said. So there's plenty of reason to include Parham in your stacks. I think you could probably throw some darts at him as an individual tight end for 3,100 on the DraftKings slate, 5,100 on FanDuel. He's, man, not that crazy good rated. 20th across the board. Did I do that before I gave him? I think I did those ratings before he picked up a little bit of upside, though. It was another one I noticed after the fact. So keep an eye on Parham. He might climb if you just go by the ratings. Projections and point per dollar should be pretty good here. Josh Kelly, not really a interesting piece. Darius Davis, another option that's just, a little bit of downfield equity, and I believe also returns punts and kicks, if I'm not mistaken. Played 15 snaps with the offense last week, caught 2 of 2 for 7 yards, and does return kicks and punts. Had the 104-yard punt return with a touchdown in week 9. That's what I was remembering. So another one of those guys is just, if you get him out on the field for a big play with the offense and then he happens to take one to the house in the return game, maybe you get something there. But that's a really extreme dart throw. You're compounding 2 very unlikely events there. So I don't think you need to go that far down the depth chart. But like here, these guys are interesting. It could just be Eckler Day, though. Against a defense that's open enough. 19 carries last week for 67. Also caught 4 passes for another 48. Week before that, 14 carries and 7 targets. So essentially, mid-20s touch volume, or potential for any given week, depending on how many balls he catches. 100 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown upside any given week. 8,688, you're paying full freight for Austin Eckler, but I think it's a good spot for him. I don't think there's anything wrong with considering him a pretty high-end running back on this slate. He ranks second by points on FanDuel, 7th by value, second by points, and 12th by points per dollar on DraftKings. So a little bit better looking on the FanDuel slate, given the points per dollar of it. But Austin Eckler is a premium option any given week at the running back position. So a lot of love on this. Damn it. Didn't mean to do that. A lot of enthusiasm on the Packers side. And definitely just some very high-end players that you can go to in pretty much any given matchup on the Chargers side. So we can get to both sides of this game, 44-point total. Healthy enough. Miami, clear go-to. Nothing but scoring out of this offense all season long. First on both sides by points, 4th by value on FanDuel, 11th by value on DK. Tua Tagovailoa, 7,700, 8,400. One of the top QBs on the board overall. Tua ranks second by points on FanDuel, 7th by points per dollar, 2nd and 13th on DraftKings. Again, the points per dollar is going to be screwy because these guys are so high priced. But these are among the guys that you just pay up. These are who you're paying up for by going to your cheap Jalen Guytons and Donald Parhams of the world. Tyreek, one of the highest projections on the entire slate. Looks amazing any given week. Jalen Waddle looks like a strong second option in that offense. Let's see, Tyreek. I feel like they haven't really had the Dolphins lately, too. Is that just me? Have we had this team on a main slate in a while? I feel like not, but maybe I'm misremembering. Tyreek, 8 catches each of the last 2 games, 112 yards and a touchdown against New England in Week 8. 62 yards in Week 9 against Kansas City. They had a bye week in Week 10, so maybe that's why I'm thinking they haven't been around for a minute. They had the KC game, then the bye. Tyreek Hill's last 4 games, 10, 15, 13, and 10 targets. I think we can safely pay full freight for Tyreek Hill. Monster upside. Trying to find anything to not like about him. Plenty of red zone targets each week. It's Tyreek Hill. Other than the price tag on its own, there's no reason not to play him. 9th ranked 6.2 yards per pass attempt for the Vegas defense. 28th ranked 4.6 yards per rush attempt. Could bode well for Achane and Mostert to have another big day. That could be problematic for the passing upside. That's really the only thing that would take away from the passing upside for this offense is if these two go out and have another day. And even in the day that they did, that was a 70-point game, obviously. They're not going to repeat that. But there should be enough volume for the receiving core to get there, too. They are favored by 13 in a 45.5-point game. So there's a lot of weight on their side. Waddle had 3 catches last week for 42. The week before, 7 catches for 121 and a touchdown. He's seen 9, 6, 12, and 6 targets his last 4 games. These are the 2 lead, clear-cut wide receiver options in this offense. And pass catchers, period. Said Wilson, you're dipping down to 5 targets, but only caught 1 of them for 31 yards. Did score a touchdown last time out. Against New England, the game before that, 1 catch, 1 yard on 1 target for 1 touchdown. Those are his only 2 touchdowns of the year, but minimal, tiny involvement. Not great for a main slate without any yardage or any additional catches behind it. You're talking about a touchdown only kind of an option. For 3,000, might be enough. Dart throw might be enough. Would like a couple catches beyond that. So the A-Chain, Mostert, not to mention Jeff Wilson, Selvin Ahmed, everybody's back now. But A-Chain, ridiculous explosive upside that we saw on display in weeks 3, 4, and 5. Week 3 against Denver in that absurd game, 18 carries, 203 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Week 4 against Buffalo, 8 carries, 101, and 2 touchdowns. And then finished it off with 11 carries and 151 yards and a touchdown against the New York Giants. Also had 2 touchdowns in the air in that Week 3 game. 4 touchdowns total that day. Absurd. Major explosive upside. Super fast. Definitely going to have some. 6,600 on DraftKings. 8,000 on FanDuel. Ranks out as RB 13-17 on FanDuel. 14-17 on DraftKings. So it doesn't really hit the board all that great in terms of the points per dollar. I think you're just talking about high ceiling more than anything else. And you do have the idea of the share with Mostert. So as high-end as it is, as much as we did see this exact backfield connect with both running backs being keys to winning in that big week, I don't love split situations. And Mostert's been involved in the entire time that A-Chain's been gone. Week 6, 17 carries, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 7, 9 carries, 45, 13, 46 and a touchdown, 12 for 85 and a touchdown in the last 2 games. He's running routes. He's targeted, not the highest target volume among running backs in the league, but not the lowest. A lot of touches in the red zone. Mostert's touched the ball in the red zone at least once every single game this year. Just once last game. Twice in the weeks before that, week 7 and week 8. 6 times in week 6. And at least 2 times each of the first 5 weeks of the season. You can't tell me Mostert's not going to be involved out there. And with A-Chain coming back from injury, uncertain situation, you can't tell me you know where that ball's going. So just that alone just kind of limits it. I'll have some, but I kind of consider them more, not dart throws, because they both project out great, and there are going to be touches for both guys. So they're more than dart throws, but they're less secure than just a Austin Eckler. You know? Josh Jacobs on the other side is more secure, to be perfectly honest. Josh Jacobs is going to eat all the volume in the running game for that team, as usual. So they're not bad options, they're just challenging, I think is maybe a way to put it. On the other side, it's Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers. I really like all 3 of those skill players. I don't need them necessarily in stacks with Aiden O'Connell, though. I think I just take them as individuals. When I talk about security, this is what I mean. Josh Jacobs, 27 carries last week, 26 carries the week before. 15 and 11 the 2 weeks before that, all right, but was targeted 4 times each of those games. 25 and 20 and 17 and 17 and 19. There's a lot of carries for Josh Jacobs. 116 yards, no touchdown last week. 98 yards and 2 touchdowns against my Giants the week before that. Well, these aren't my Giants. These are somebody else's Giants. These Giants suck. My Giants suck too, but they win the occasional Super Bowl. So Josh Jacobs on his own, really, really strong. I don't sweat the 11th ranked 3.9 yards per rush attempt. For Devontae Adams' sake, I don't sweat the 6.5 yards per pass attempt, 17th ranked. I do sweat the Aiden O'Connell part of it. But Aiden O'Connell targeted him 13 times last week. He was also the prime target when Aiden O'Connell played earlier in the year. He's one of the best pure receivers in football. So no reason in the world not to go to Devontae Adams. If you do stack Aiden O'Connell, you can go Aiden O'Connell plus either one of these guys. Or you can maybe change the script a little bit and go Aiden O'Connell plus Jacoby Myers. I don't think I want to go Aiden O'Connell plus 2. I really don't think he gets there. Hunter Renfrow has been super limited. Mike Mayer, he's been all right, but not the most productive tight end overall. Mayer has 1 touchdown on the season. It came last week, 19 yards, 3 catches on 5 targets. Has not been over 20 yards in the last 4 games. Had a 75-yard game in week 6. Was back at 39 yards in week 5. No yards on no catches despite running routes and playing snaps in weeks 3 and 4. Just 1 catch. He had just 1 catch the first 4 weeks of the season. It's been really limited output from Mike Mayer. He's out there. If you're just looking to buy snaps and empty routes, he's there. But it's not great. Renfro's just like the nominal 3. He got to 1 target last week, 5 yards. Hasn't been targeted more than 4 times all season. Hasn't had more than 2 catches all season. Hasn't scored a touchdown all season. And hasn't been over the 32 yards that he put up in week 9 all season. That's a really tragic year for Hunter Renfrow. A receiver that I kind of liked is like a sneaky, cheapo option from week to week coming into the season. Those days are done. Trey Tucker, nothing to speak of. DeAndre Carter, nah. I think you stick with the high-end options if you're going to Vegas at all. Jacobs, Adams, Myers. A lot of big guesses on the Miami side. Mostly among these 4 guys, plus Tua. Big guesses to Miami stacks involving those 5 guys. In stacks, you definitely want to include Berrios and Wilson. Said Wilson, not Jeff Wilson. Don't think there's enough for Jeff Wilson. I would also include Durham Smythe in stacks. He's questionable. If he doesn't go, then maybe it's Julian Hill for even cheaper. None of that is all that great, though. Smythe bounced back to 3 catches each of the last 2 weeks, 3 targets each week, 28 yards, 17 yards before their bye. Went 3 weeks before that with no catches and just 1 target in 3 weeks. So went through a mid-season stretch where it was really, really limited, but did have like a 3+ catch average the first 4 weeks of the season and a handful of yards. So, a little bit of potential there. As a very, very cheap tight end, I think you include him in stacks. You're not playing Durham Smythe on his own. But for $2,600, I think you can include him to average down the price of a Miami stack. Certainly helps average down the price of a Tua plus 2 kind of a stack. Dennis says, also not Brian Wilson. Of the Beach Boys, I imagine. I think it's actually come up on their show before. That Beach Boys movie is actually pretty good. I forget what the hell it's called. I never knew in all my years until somebody told me, or until I read it somewhere, that the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds was considered one of the best albums of all time. And it very well is and deserves to be. Never really appreciated like the musical depth until somebody told me to go actually listen. And then it's like, wow, there's a lot going on here. Which one of these was it? Love and Mercy, it's called. Paul Dano and John Cusack, Paul Giamatti, Elizabeth Banks. Good cast. Not crazy good, but late night biopic time. It's decent. If you've already seen Walk the Line a bunch of times, flip over and watch the Brian Wilson one. All biopics are essentially the same, especially about rock and roll. Anyway, let's move on. Remember when I said this was going to be over by 10? I lied. I lied to you guys. I lied to myself. I lied to Joker. We're like halfway through. We are going to hit the gas pedal a little bit, though. I do want to get through this. I got a lot to get done. Fake Thanksgiving number 2 tomorrow. So I got to get lineups built, and I got to be out the door by 12, 12:30. So got a lot to do tonight. See this entire team? We'll pick up some ground here. Don't play these guys. You can play him just on his own. You don't want to stack the Giants. You can maybe, if you've only got 3,000 or 3,200 or 3,500 left, you can maybe grab one share of Slate and Wandale or Jalen Hyatt. But it is not going to work out. Even against the pass defense, it's allowing 7.2 yards per pass attempt, 28th ranked. 25th ranked, 4.4 yards per rush attempt. That's why maybe you can play some Saquon. And because he's supremely talented and not all that expensive, don't play Giant stacks. Just don't do that to yourself. There's no reason. We talked about Brian Robinson. Really like the play. Stronger on the back of the reminder that Antonio Gibson's not playing, or most likely he's doubtful. He's not in projections right now. Chris Rodriguez would pick up a little bit, but most of that value goes in Brian Robinson's direction, going up against the Giants defense that ranked 30th in the league, allowing 4.7 yards per rush attempt. They rank 29th, allowing 7.3 yards per pass attempt. They're going to be on their heels the entire game because they're just going to keep giving the ball back to Washington. They're not going to be driving. They're not going to be creating first downs. They're not going to be scoring. They're going to turn the ball over. This is Washington all day long. Point spread's 10. Game total's 37.5. Neither of these is ideal in Vegas. Could feed the idea of just one of these guys getting there. But I do think there's room for Sam Howell, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson stacks. I do think Logan Thomas can be involved in that, and Curtis Samuel can be involved in that. So I think we go to some Washington here. They didn't rank at the top of the board. They're not my top priority play by any means. Could easily be a day where they just light up this team and take their foot off the pedal in the second half. But Sam Howell's been good. Good to underratedly good through most of the season. He's kept this team in games. Where's my Sam Howell? Of course, the one guy I would want to talk about down here. There he is. Sammy throwing the ball 40 times a game, 278 yards a game, 17 touchdown passes on the season. He's thrown nine picks. Fine. For a guy who's been as cheap as he is every week, and as unpopular as he is most weeks, getting 40 pass attempt volume and this many touchdowns and that kind of, I have no issues with the 9 interceptions. That's fine. Keep doing what you're doing, Sam. 7 yards per pass attempt. He's thrown the ball 41 times in the red zone. Has the ability to run the ball. Just 3.1 attempts a game, 174 yards, 5.6 yards per rush attempt, just 1 touchdown running. Was expected to run the ball a little bit more than he has, but he has been slinging it, and there is nothing to stop him from doing well against this Giants team. So I think we can say, kind of again, we've been going to this spot a little bit lately, and I think we can go to it again here. There's enough support for this passing offense, even in not a great game environment. It's probably a situation where you want either Robinson or a Howell +1, but I think the Howell +1 options are interesting enough with all 3 wide receivers and the tight end. McLaurin, 4 catches, just 33 yards last week, 8 targets. Week before, 5 catches, 73 yards on 8 targets, 5 for 63 and a touchdown on 12 targets before that. Dotson, disappointing week last week, 0 catches on 2 targets, 0 yards. But the week before, 4 catches, 69 yards and a touchdown, 8 catches and 108 yards and a touchdown in the week before that against Philadelphia. 8, 10, and 8 targets in weeks 7, 8, and 9. just 2 targets last week. Oh, Dennis says, what do you think about Howell, Robinson, and Dotson? There you go. And yeah, Paul Dano, good start. I just watched this afternoon, There Will Be Blood was on. So I watched it yet again. Seen it many, many times, but it's such a good movie. So yeah, upside for Dotson for sure. You know, kind of bounced back the 3 weeks leading up to last week's clunker, but was looking a little bit more like what we expected him to be. Curtis Samuel, just 2 catches last week, 6 yards on 6 targets. Didn't play the week before. 4 catches in each of the 3 games before that. 7 and 6 catches in weeks 4 and 5. 2 touchdowns on the season. Plenty of volume, plenty of targets. A very solid, underneath operator. I don't mind the Curtis Samuel play, especially against these Giants. Guys like that tend to do well. And then Logan Thomas, tight ends, tend to do pretty well against these Giants as well. Thomas, 5 catches for 40 last week. Hasn't had less than 4 catches since week 6. In week 7 against these Giants, 4 catches for 51. 3 touchdowns on the season. Plenty of targets going his way. 6, 8, 5, and 5 the last 4 weeks. With upside for more, I think. Diami, like I mentioned, just another total dart throw option. But a dart throw that could get in the end zone again. Two catches for 41 and a touchdown last week. That was on 2 targets, 10 routes run. 4 targets on 15 routes run the week before. Only caught 2 of them for 33. But he's that kind of a weapon. You run him out there, have him run 15 routes, target him 3 or 4 times. If he comes down with 2 of them, there's a good chance he's putting up a decent-sized play, a little chunk of yardage, and if you throw it to him in the right spot of the field, maybe you get the touchdown out of him. So as a dart throw, again, just against these Giants and for the extremely cheap price on DraftKings, I don't mind a couple shares of Diami Brown. Not a priority, not one to get carried away with, but a value dart. Crowder, Pringle, a lot less so. Pringle drew... Well, he had 2 targets last week, 4 the week before as well. 3 catches, 55 yards. 1 catch, 7 yards. Hasn't been in the end zone yet. But if I'm calling Diami Brown a dart throw, I guess I can't really say Byron Pringle isn't one. A little bit thinner just on the lack of touchdowns, but similar targeting, similar opportunity. Fewer routes. There is that. So that's where I'll ding him a little. Diami runs a few more routes a game. Either one is just a total dart throw, though. This one's a little bit of the oddball. I talked about it at the top. A lot of cost on the Buffalo side, and not breaking the slate projections-wise. 11th and 14th on FanDuel. 11th and 22nd on DraftKings. Josh Allen, a good but not top-of-the-board projection at quarterback. Right, they're running some... There's a lot of guys right in that range. But what was he? 18.92? So this is him here. Granted, I could just sort this largest to smallest, and then we could look at it that way, like sane people. But all of Goff, Tua, Fields, Dak, Purdy, Stroud, Lawrence, and Love land slightly above by raw projection. And obviously, you're talking about a extremely different salary. These are the same projection. I was going to say these are all close. These are literally the same projection, and then these are all extremely, extremely close. There's very little daylight here. This is not me saying don't play Josh Allen. This is not me saying even that he's a poor play this week. But he's going up against the Jets defense that's allowing 5.3 yards per pass attempt, just 169 yards on the season per game on the season. That's the best mark on the board. Second best mark on the board. Third best mark. Damn it. Who's at 166? Right right there. Dallas. So that's the third best passing yardage total on the allowed on the season. Second best, tied for second best touchdown total allowed. They've generated 25 sacks, 30% pressure rate, highest pressure rate on the board. Believe. Yep. By 2 full percentage points. Again, it's Josh Allen. It's, pressure's not going to really throw him. But he also hasn't really been at his peak. Throwing the ball 35 times a game, 260 yards, 19 touchdowns, but 11 interceptions. Like I said going into last week, it's a high-risk, high-reward guy. That's just the nature of this quarterback. 7.4 yards per pass attempt, 4.5 air yards per attempt, 8.4 intended air yards per attempt. He's rushed for 246 yards, 5.1 yards per attempt, and he's run the ball in 7 times. There's major any given slate upside in Josh Allen as an individual. Josh Allen naked stack would be interesting. It's not my favorite idea. I don't think it's unplayable, though. I really would prefer him with Stephon Diggs, but given how expensive Diggs is, that might be the better angle into Josh Allen, is either go Allen Kincaid, Allen Gabe Davis, or a little bit of Allen naked. Maybe, just to get different with it. Diggs is obviously the top option in that passing attack. There's no question about it. Steph Diggs. Last time out, just 34 yards, 3 catches, 5 targets. Just 7 targets the week before that, but he got in the end zone, 6 catches, 86 yards. Hasn't been over 100 yards since week 6. He had that stretch of 4 straight games over 100 yards. 3 touchdowns in week 4, 1 touchdown in week 5. But it's not great. I don't love the downturn in targets the last 2 weeks. But it's Steph Diggs. I mean, I'm not sweating it. I don't love that he hasn't been over 100 yards in that stretch. But he's the clear-cut first receiver, the clear-cut first read in this offense. Gabe Davis, by comparison, 6 targets last week, 2 catches, 56 yards. Just 2 targets the week before that, didn't catch either of them. Had a good week 8, 12 targets, caught 9 of them for 87 yards and a touchdown. That's his second best game of the year. Had a 6-catch, 100-yard game with a touchdown in week 5. Scored touchdowns in each of weeks 2 through 5. He's been good. I mean, it's a pretty solid season overall for Gabe Davis, especially considering that he's still only 55, 64. Doesn't project out like a... What are you doing? Did you carry a plate in here? So it's like a cheap option. That's a pretty decent receiver. It's just going up against a rough matchup. But I don't dislike the Gabe Davis side of that if you want to get cheaper with and different with your Buffalo stacks. Shakir, 1 catch last week. Good stretch the 3 weeks before that. 4, 6, and 4 catches. Caught all of his targets each of those 3 weeks. 35, 92, and 57 yards. Hasn't been in the end zone since week 2. That's the only touchdown on the season. With a volume uptick that started in week 7, it's a reasonable enough option. They're also dealing with Trent Sherfield, questionable. Got Deontay Hardy below him on the depth chart. Sherfield's ankle issue, did practice in full on Friday. Seems like he's going to go. Just 2 targets in week 9, no targets last week, no targets the week before that. Extremely limited. High point of 3 targets any given week all season. High point of 2 catches and 18 yards for Sherfield. Hardy just kind of surpassed by Shakir. More targets early in the year, 4-3 kind of a range. Has been at 1 or fewer in each of the last 5 weeks. So it's really Diggs, Davis, Shakir in terms of the wideouts, but that's three pretty good options. Obviously, one superstar, a very good option, and a pretty decent cheap option. And then Kincaid is a highly capable tight end who's probably going to draw some popularity. 5 catches for him last week, got in the end zone, 6 targets, 11 targets, caught 10 of them the week before that. Has really stepped up in volume, opportunity, red zone targeting since Knox went out. That's your lead tight end here. For 4,900, 5,800, that's a very, very playable option. Still, 39.5 point total, Buffalo favored by 7.5, but a good pass defense for New York. I can see why the projections are somewhat, it's not limiting, but there's a little bit of a thin slice coming off the top of Buffalo here. On the Jets side, it's really just about getting to the skill players, I think. You can maybe throw some cheap Zach Wilson stacks out there. It's probably not going to go well. If you haven't watched Zach Wilson all year, every now and then he can make a throw that makes you go, wow, maybe there's some talent there. And then he makes another, 5 throws over the next 15 snaps, and you say, nope. The other team's got the ball all of a sudden because he threw it to the guy in the wrong colored jersey. That's the kind of quarterback Zach Wilson is. He is very cheap at 4,800 though. 6,300 on FanDuel. I'm sure he doesn't rank well. Zach ranks as quarterback 19 across the board on FanDuel, 19-14 on DraftKings. Not a good option. He's just got really good players around him. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson most specifically. Allen Lazard, moderately okay option. Projects out all right, better on DraftKings, obviously. But Breece Hall, I'll take my individual shares of. I have no need for anybody else in the backfield there. Dalvin Cook. Just 13 carries for 28 yards for Breece last week. Caught all 3 of his targets for 47. Week before, 16 carries for 50. Caught all 4 of his targets for an additional 10. Solid week against the Giants in week 8. 12 carries, just 17 yards, but caught 6 passes for 76 and a touchdown. Had the big week 5 against Denver, 177 yards and a touchdown. That's his big week on the season. But significant rushing upside. Going up against a team that's allowing 4.6 yards per rush attempt and ranks 29th. 6,400, 7,100 is pretty good in terms of value for Breece. He is RB7-4 on FanDuel, RB6-4 on DraftKings. Points value. So Breece on his own, you can sign me up for, and then some Garrett Wilson on his own is less appealing because Zach's still got to get him the ball. I mean, Zach's still got to get Breece the ball too, and we've certainly seen Jets quarterbacks screw up handoffs plenty of times. But it's a little bit less challenging than actually throwing and completing a pass. That said, Garrett Wilson, each of the last 3 weeks, 7 catches for 100, 7 catches for 80, 9 catches for 93, 13 targets in week 8 and 9, and then 14 targets last week. On sheer volume, even though he only ends up with like half of them in his hands, they just keep going to him enough that there's enough potential here for fantasy scoring. It would be nice to get him in the end zone. He hasn't been in the end zone since week 2. But the catches, the PPR, and the yardage total is enough to support him. Lazard is really the other playable receiver here, and then Conklin, the tight end. But again, you're dealing with a situation where Zach Wilson's got to get him the ball. He's only managed to do that 6 times in the last 3 games. Lazard hasn't been over 50 yards. He was over 50 yards in week 4, and that's it all season. That was the week he scored a touchdown. That's it. Hasn't been over 3 catches all season. Hasn't been over 6 targets, but last 3 weeks, 6, 6, and 5 targets. A little bit of an uptick in opportunity. Hasn't really turned into anything. Conklin had 7 catches last week, 6 catches the week before, 66 yards in week 9, 70 yards last week. Caught all of his targets each of those 2 weeks, too. Seems like he's the pretty clear number 2 option in this passing game now, in terms of volume. So maybe you bump him up a little bit ahead of Lazard in your pecking order here. But really, if I'm picking anything from this game, I think it's just Brees on his own, or from this side of this game, it's just Brees on his own. I think you can use him effectively in that capacity as a run-back play against Buffalo stacks. You can also use Garrett Wilson like that. I wouldn't get carried away with too many run-back plays of anybody else in this offense, though. I wouldn't blame you if you skip this game entirely. I'm not going to. I wouldn't blame me if I skipped this game entirely either. Just to do it real quick. This is a good receiver. That's a good receiver. This is not a good quarterback. This is not a good quarterback. So they're dealing with the same problem of he needs to get them the ball. And he's going up against a defense allowing just 5.8 yards per pass attempt. That ranks 4th. And 3.8 yards per rush attempt. That ranks 9th. It's not a good spot. 151 yards a game, 9 touchdowns allowed on the season for the Cleveland defense, and they lead second on the board with 30 sacks, third on the board with 30 sacks, a 27% pressure rate. Kenny Pickett running for his life. Kenny Pickett throwing against a good pass defense, two good but not like over-the-top outrageously good receivers, and one guy who's found the end zone once in the last 24 years. I do not like this option. 33-point total. If you weren't here at the top of the show, that's one of the lowest overall totals in the National Football League in the last 20 years. Not a lot of appeal. Jalen Warren, allegedly going to be the lead back officially and finally this week. I don't know if I fully trust that. Carried the ball 15 times for 101 yards and a touchdown last week. Was targeted 4 times, caught 2 of them for 9 yards. 88 yards on 11 carries the week before. Najee carried the ball 16 times for 82 and a touchdown last week. 16 times the week before that for 69 and a touchdown. So it's not like he hasn't been involved. It's not like he hasn't gotten the ball in the end zone each of the last 2 weeks. It just seems like it's going to continue to seem like it's just this split situation. And going up against a good rush defense in a bad game, I just don't need to go here. I really, really don't see it. In the receiving game, again, having to rely on Kenny Pickett. It's really only the top 2 receivers. They're also getting Pat Freiermuth back at the tight end spot, so that's key for them. But again, they're inserting him into a bad situation. He is 2,500, I'm just noticing, on DraftKings, so there's some value there for sure. Deontay, just 1 catch for 17 yards last week, did have his 90 yards on 7 catches and scored his touchdown finally in Week 9, was targeted 9 times in that game. He was targeted 14 times in Week 8, caught 8 of them for 85 yards. So that's a little bit of ability that's probably also approaching what the ceiling playing with this quarterback looks like. George Pickens, 300-yard games this season, but 22, -1, and 45 yards the last 3 weeks. 5, 5, and 4 targets. Just 1 touchdown in the last 3 weeks. 3 touchdowns all season. Freiermuth in the early part of the year. 4 targets in each of weeks 1, 3, and 4. Just 1 target in week 2. Had 2 touchdowns out of the first 4 weeks. Got 1 in week 1. And got 1 in week 3. That was his high game on the season. 3 catches for 41 and a touchdown. I don't know. The heralding of a really good tight end coming back is like I said, it's a capable tight end who can score touchdowns from time to time, but a low volume tight end. And you're inserting him into a terrible situation, game-wise. 2,500 is a very cheap price, though. Ranks him 11th and 10th on FanDuel. He's 10th by points on DraftKings, but the 2,500 does have him as tight end 1 by points per dollar on DraftKings. I hate that, to be quite honest. I hate that he's so cheap because I do think that's going to lead people there. That feels a little trappy to me. It's touchdown dependent. I mean, Pat Freiermuth is not likely to go out there and see 10 targets and put up 8 catches for 100 yards. You're talking about more need for him to go out there, get 4 targets, 3 in the red zone, and come down with 2 of them in the end zone, and a total of like 12 yards. That's Pat Freiermuth. So, yeah, it's not my favorite play. Given that the points per dollar, again, if you're just blocking off the free square, it is a worthy play. But I feel like that'll get popular if it's coming up that heavy, and it's a name that's kind of coming back that people are aware of. It feels like it feels like more trappy than value. He's owned in the mid-single digits, projection-wise. But that was 1. Just eyeballing this, so forgive me if I miss a guy or 2. 2. 3. He's like tight end 5, I think, by ownership. So it's fine. It's not like he's crazy overowned. That was my concern initially. Like if he was owned like Trey McBride is supposed to be owned, then I think that would definitely be a spot to get away from. Right now, I think it's perfectly fine to go to because he's not crazy popular, and he does have a lot of points per dollar value. But that points per dollar number could end up being a little bit of a trap just because he's a 3 to 4 target tight end who, if he doesn't come down in the end zone, you don't get a lot. You could just be booking a $2,500 4-point game. Calvin Austin, Allen Robinson, Connor Hayward. There's nothing really to see downboard here. Nothing to see downboard on this side. Playing with Dorian Thompson-Robinson just completely limits everything on the Cleveland side. Backup quarterback. It's not like this is a good defense they're going up against. But Amari Cooper, Jerome Ford, it's not like it's an offense that's like a must-have group of skill players anyway. Even with Deshaun Watson, we wouldn't really be going to them in this spot anyway. Thompson-Robinson played week 4. 121 yards on 36 pass attempts. Completed 19 of them. 3 additional completions to the other team. No touchdowns. It's not a good game. 3.4 yards per pass attempt. That is not a good game. Threw 1 pass last week, completed it for 9 yards. You've got the split backfield situation here between Ford and Hunt. Ford came out last week, 17 carries, 107 yards. And Hunt came out and took his touchdown away. 10 carries, 32 yards, and a touchdown for Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt has a touchdown in his last 5 games. Going back to week 6, 12 carries, 47, and a touchdown. 10 for 31 and 2 touchdowns in week 7. 14 for 55 and a touchdown. 14 for 38 and a touchdown. 10 for 32 and a touchdown. It's not the Kareem Hunt. It kind of is the Kareem Hunt of old in that he's vulturing touches and important touches and making himself frustratingly involved here. But it's in a different role now. Now he's getting tons of red zone touches. 3 red zone touches in each of weeks 6 through 9 and 2 last week. They're just feeding him the rock when they get in close. And he's converting them. He's getting it into the end zone. He's not really involved in the passing game now, though. Just 1 target in 3 straight games from weeks 7 through 9 and then no targets last week in a situation where Jerome Ford had 4, 2, 7, and 1 targets in the same stretch. So I just don't love the guesswork involved. If I have to go one direction in a backfield in not the greatest situation in the world, I probably still go to the cheaper Hunt and hope that he continues that touchdown streak. But I don't really like either side of it. Ford for yardage, total volume, and involvement in the passing game is fine. But how much do we want to be involved in this passing game in this kind of a game total? It's just not a great option. Amari Cooper, the clear wide receiver 1. Not that it really matters. 6 catches last week, 98 yards, 5 catches the week before, 139 and a touchdown. Plenty of targets, plenty of volume. Just, again, who's throwing him the ball? Elijah Moore, 5 catches, 44 and a touchdown last week. 7 targets, one of his higher games of the entire season. A reasonable, 3-4 catches each week. Big play ability, but not big play results, I think is fair to say about Elijah Moore at this point. And then we're immediately in the Ced Tillman range. 1 catch in the last, since week 4. They had a bye week, 3 DNPs in there, and then he had 1 catch on 1 target 2 weeks ago. No catches on 3 targets last week. David Njoku is obviously your next man up in that offense. He saw increased target volume as the season continued. Last week, 6 catches for 58 on 9 targets. The last 4 weeks, he's seen 9, 8, 6, and 9 targets. So he's very, very involved. Scored touchdowns in weeks 8 and 9. But yet again, why go to, not extreme discount options in this game when it's just so bad? Vegas is screaming, don't play this game. 33-point total. That's all I have to say about that. 3 games to go. This one is one of the more compelling games on the slate, really. 47-point total. It doesn't seem like it on the surface, but one of the closer games with just a 1-point spread. And a healthy point total. And good skill players on both sides. I just really like that it's kind of just a shootout. A gunslinger with his 2 sidearms here. And kind of a gunslinger with his 2 sidearms here. Each team has a okay third banana receiver. Tutu Atwell, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Each team has a kind of split backfield. Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman. Kenny Walker and Zach Charbonnet. There's a lot of same across these 2 teams. Tyler Higbee is probably the most reliable, highest projected tight end in this group. With these guys splitting it 3 ways. That's the primary difference between these 2 offenses. But I don't mind going to this game at all. I will have shares of this one. Geno facing a Rams defense allowing 290-plus yards per game, 6.8 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, and an 8.2-yard defensive ADOT. They do have 31 sacks on the season. Just 6 picks. On the other side, Seattle's got 30 sacks. They gain a little bit more pressure in a heads-up competition. They also only have 6 interceptions on the year. They've allowed 12 passing touchdowns, 238 yards a game, 6.3 yards per attempt. Stafford throws the ball 35 times a game. Geno throws it 34 times a game, or 33. 240 yards, 258, 7.2 yards per attempt versus 7.4 yards per attempt. Geno's thrown 11 TDs, Stafford only 8. 7 interceptions apiece. Neither one of these guys is the most reliable quarterback in the world. Geno's come down off of his ridiculous accuracy numbers from last year. But I like the weapons, and either one of these guys against these defenses is capable of having a day. And at least capable of supporting his wide receiver upside. So Cooper Kupp, obviously superstar potential any given slate. Puka Nacua, major piece of early value this season. Plenty of individual upside. Last few games, Cooper Kupp, last time out, just 2 catches, 48 yards, 7 targets, only held in 2 of them. 10 targets the week before that, only held in 4 of them. It hasn't been a great 3-week stretch before leading up to the bye for Cooper Kupp, to be honest. 2 catches for 29, 4 catches for 21, 2 catches for 48, despite being targeted 24 times across the 3 weeks. You throw Cooper Kupp 24 passes across 3 games, you're expecting more than 8 catches. You're expecting more than, what's that, 78 yards? 88 yards? 98 yards. I'm dumb. 98 yards. If over 3 games, that's not production. He had 118 yards on 8 catches in week 5, 148 on 7 catches with a touchdown in week 6. Over that same stretch, Puka in week 7 caught 8 for 154, but his weeks 8 and 9 weren't all that good either. Only caught 3 of 7 in each game, 43 yards and 32 yards. Has not been in the end zone since week 5, only 2 touchdowns on the season. Obviously some major yardage games. A very high-end target. It's not the 15 and 20 targets that he got in weeks 1 and 2. But since then, he's had 7 targets in every game that he wasn't in double digits. And then he's had 3 double-digit games, 10, 11, and 12. A very highly involved receiver. Price is down a little bit, 71.75. Project great. Very playable option. Tutu became more limited. He did 4 catches on 7 targets last time, only 13 yards. Hasn't seen the end zone since week 7. Did have 3 touchdowns early in the season, but his volume got pretty significantly cut. He's a playable dart throw, but he's not much more than that at this point. On the Higbee side, just 1 target last game. 50 snaps with the offense, ran 23 routes, targeted just once, didn't catch it. Ran 25 routes in week 8, caught 5 of 7 for 45 yards. Hasn't scored all season. Some of his early touchdowns probably went Tutu's direction. Not a great year from Higbee, though. 71-yard high in week 3, 5 catches. 5 catches the next week for 64 yards. Since then, hasn't been over 50 yards, hasn't been over, well, he had 5 catches in week 8. In weeks 5, 6, 7, and 9, he had no more than 2 catches any given week. That's our backfield, too, I forgot. Hendo and Freeman. Hendo signed off the couch a few weeks ago, has gotten volume every week. 10 carries last week, just 19 yards, caught 2 of 2 for 16. Week before that was better, 12 carries for 31, caught 3 of 3 for 54. First week back, they gave him the ball 18 times. He scored a touchdown, gained 61 yards. Freeman, just 32 yards on 12 carries last week. Not 1 target on 8 routes run, 15 routes run the week before, untargeted. So it's almost a direct split right now, which makes me not really like either one of these options. I'm giving Hendo a little bit more of it, but I don't know that I should be. I'll flag these guys too to take another look. I might draw this down a little bit, and it would land them both probably under 10. I don't love how just even of a split that is. That said, 4.3 yards per rush attempt, 21st ranked. There's reason to believe that one of them could succeed. Neither one of them crazy heavily targeted, though. I think I leave them probably out of stacks. It's probably just, major focus on those two with any Stafford plays, and then some Higbee, maybe some Tutu. I think you can safely leave them out of stacks. And with that, I don't know that I need either one of those running backs just as an individual. It's not like they're extreme value plays at that level, especially when we don't know where the ball and the volume and the touchdowns are going. And then you got to deal with that on Seattle's side as well. Kenny Walker, last week 19 carries, 63 yards. 1 big catch for 64 yards and a touchdown. Zach Charbonnet, just 6 carries, 44 yards. Caught 4 of 5 passes for 18. Week before, only 4 carries and 1 target. Week before that, 5 carries, 2 targets. But just enough of a poacher there to create concerns, create a little bit of havoc in where Walker projects. Walker's still the clear-cut top projected back there. But Charbonnet's gained a little bit of ground each week. Has a little bit of big play upside in him. They spent pretty good draft capital on him. They've talked about liking him a lot, wanting him to get more involved. Walker projects perfectly fine for the money. I just have a little bit of a harder time trusting him than I thought I would. He ranks RB 10 and 8 on FanDuel, RB 10 and 13 on DraftKings. A little bit better looking on FanDuel. But just kind of an also-ran, he's a little bit better in the points, in the raw point scoring, than Devin Singletary, who ranks 11th. But Singletary costs 6,500 to Walker's 7,400 without much daylight between their projections. That makes him 8th for Walker and 2nd by points per dollar on FanDuel. And then the same story, 6,700 versus 5,300. It's 13th versus RB 13 by value versus RB 1 by value when you're talking about 10th and 12th by points. James Conner slides in between them on DraftKings. Conner's RB 11 and 3. So both of those guys look better than Kenny Walker. Charbonnet is not unplayable, but I think he's more of just total dart throw. Given the sub 10 touches, let's say, 5 carries, 5 targets, I think maybe is fair. So 10 touches, call it. You need that big play. You need that big home run play. You need him to fall in the end zone. So a little bit touchdown, a little bit big play dependent. As a very cheap running back, maybe you could throw the dart, but I don't really like playing running back that way. I like a little bit more of a secure floor in the running back position. I'll eat chalk at running back and just get different at receiver. It's typically how I approach it, so I probably wouldn't have much of them here. Fant, Disley, Parkinson, we talked about just being the three-headed tight end position. Don't really like any part of it. And then we've got Metcalf, we've got Lockett banged up, and Jackson Smith. DK, 7 catches last week, 98 yards, 12 targets. Plenty of volume. Would see a little bit of a additional uptick if Lockett doesn't go. Last week, Lockett, 92 yards on 8 catches, had a touchdown. Plenty of volume for him, 9, 8, and 10 targets the last 3 weeks running. Again, he's dealing with a hamstring. Pete Carroll said that he's a not game time decision, said he's truly questionable. Meaning not just NFL injury report questionable, but truly, I don't know if he's going to play. Is that Pete Carroll being honest? Pete Carroll doing a little coach speak, gamesmanship? Who knows? As I said before, it seems like these guys tend to play for Seattle a lot more often than not. If he doesn't go, Jackson Smith and Jigba, 4 catches last week on 5 targets for 53 yards, 6 catches on 7 for 63 the week before that. Scored a touchdown in week 7, scored another one in week 8. Limited by his ADOT, limited by just operating more around the line of scrimmage overall. But a frequent route runner, a fairly high-end target who would gain a little bit of upside in that situation. Then you'd probably see a little bit of an uptick for like Jake Bobo from way down the depth chart. But that's not really all that strong an option. He peaked in week 7, had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 61 and a touchdown. Outside of that, no more than 2 targets any given week. No other one other touchdown. Scored on 1 catch in week 3. I think Bobo would only be in there if we don't get Lockett. And you would see it come through in the projections. So big yes to each of these spots. Well, yeah, I'm going to say big yes. Why not? Where are we? Seattle, LA. All right. Medium size, yes. Mid-board kind of a yes. But I could see either one of these stacks succeeding. It would not surprise me either way. If a Stafford Kupp Nakua, a Geno DK Walker, a Geno DK Tyler, any one of these combinations on either side. And I think this game's got capable run back plays too. Like if you go Stafford Kupp skinny stack and run back DK on the other side of it, there's a lot of potential there. And honestly, on a points per like just raw talent basis, points per projection basis, you're not paying all that much. Less so if you use Puka instead of Cooper. There's a lot of ways to stitch this game together among the 6 key players. The Bulls came back and beat the Heat. Damn. Giannis had 40. I love that I just talked through like the entire NBA slate while we do these shows. It looks like my lineup still got some work to do. Got some chasers in here, though. All right, so that's that one. 2 to go. Tampa, San Fran, then Tennessee, Jacksonville. Then we're going to punch out of here. 42-point total. Not the greatest on the board. Obviously, heavily slanted in one direction. San Francisco favored by 11.5. That said, I don't think, as I said at the top of the show, I don't think it's completely crazy to think that Tampa Bay hangs in at least a little bit through the first half, maybe encourages them scoring from San Francisco. Baker's capable enough. Mike Evans is really good. Rachaad White sees a lot of targets for a running back. Chris Godwin, another very good receiving option. Their defense, at least against the run, maybe limits what San Francisco wants to do to some degree, but that said, you're talking about limiting Christian McCaffrey. Never a good proposition. He projects out great. Just a lot of weapons and a lot of dynamic talent on that San Francisco side. So all the enthusiasm is over here, but I think you can grab a couple contrarian Baker Mayfield plus Evans plus Rachaad White type stacks. White, I don't think is going to be as popular as he has been. He ranks 18th and 16th for me, 18th and 19th on DraftKings. So probably not going to be nearly the popular play that he's been the last couple of weeks. In last week's game, 3 targets, 20 carries, 51 yards. Didn't find the end zone on the ground, but did get in the end zone through the air. Caught 2 of his targets for 47 yards and a touchdown. 20 carries in week 9. 73 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, also caught 4 of 4 for 46. Had 7 targets, caught all 7 of them for 70 yards in week 8. Had 6 targets, caught all 6 of them for 65 yards in week 7. 4 targets in week 6. He is very involved in their passing game. That's why I like to continue going back to him. I think where there's PPR scoring, he's even more valuable. Just a sneaky good running back. Not sneaky because he's been played the last couple of weeks, but if he gets less popular this week, could be an interesting spot to go back to. Don't forget his value in a PPR sense. Between Evans and Godwin, getting more on Mike Evans this year. 143 and a touchdown on 6 catches last week. 6 touchdowns on the season. Just 2 games over 100 yards. Well over 100 for both of them. 171 back in week 2, 143 last week. Tons of targets, tons of upside, tons of volume, lots of red zone looks. Godwin, just 1 touchdown all season. 4 catches last week for 54 on 6 targets. The clear number 2 behind Evans now. The targets are slightly behind. The catches are slightly behind. The touchdowns are way behind. But the any given week upside for Chris Godwin is still there. He comes down with all 6 of his 6 targets. You're getting a healthy yardage total. You're getting a shot at a touchdown. He's been targeted in the red zone. Wasn't last week, but each of the 3 weeks before that, multiple targets in the red zone in 5 of their 9 games this year. 100-yard game, 8 catches in that one. Not the best season from Godwin, but that's why it cost $6,600, $6,500 this week. Price is down a little bit. Trey Palmer and Cade Otton, pretty limited downboard options. Otton's a cheap tight end. 2 catches last week for 10 yards. The week before was the kind of game you need from Cade Otton. If you play him, 6 catches on 9 targets, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was his big game of the year. He had 1 touchdown in week 4. Hasn't been over 43 yards in any other game. Hasn't scored in any other game. Palmer, 4 targets each of the last 2 weeks. 2 catches last week for 21, 3 catches for 51 the week before that. Scored in week 1, scored in week 4. Hasn't scored since. Drawing targets, though. 6, 4, and 4 the last 3 weeks. The 4th man into the Tampa passing attack, though, you're already starting to get a little bit thin. You're You're talking about number 1, actually 5th man in. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 before you get to Trey Palmer. So that's really just a dart throw. San Fran, play whoever you want. I have no issue stacking Brock Purdy. That said, as I talked about at the beginning of the show, I do think he's inflated to this kind of a projection just by the quality of his skill players. But there's nothing wrong with that. For what we need him, I don't care about what his actual NFL caliber talent is. I care about this number against this price. It's perfectly fine. McCaffrey, touchdown any given week, at least. Didn't score in last week's game. That was the first game he didn't score all year. Still had 95 yards rushing on 16 carries, 47 yards receiving on 6 catches, 10 targets. The volume's just stupid for Christian McCaffrey, as is the talent. He's 100 combined yards and at least a touchdown in most games this year. Best player in football. 9,300, 10,000. Just, you can go to him if you can figure out how to pay for it. These are the luxury items that you save money for by going to the value place. There's nothing bad about Christian McCaffrey. Debo came back last week, 4 catches, 30 yards, carried the ball 3 times for 29 yards and a touchdown, showing off his multifaceted abilities as well. Debo and Christian McCaffrey are really similar guys in that they can both play both of those positions very, very effectively. So I really like what he brings to the offense. 63.71 is still cheap for Debo as well. Major upside there. 7,200, 7,800 for Brandon Ayuk. I love that option. Ayuk got in the end zone last week. Just 3 catches on 3 targets, but 55 yards and got in the end zone. As long as he's doing that, we can tolerate a little bit of cut in volume with Debo back. Before the bye, had 9 targets, caught 5 of them for 109 yards. 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 57 yards in week 7. Significant upside. Had a 2-touchdown game back in week 1. This past week was the only other touchdown all season. But a lot of fair games in terms of 50-plus yards, 4 or 5 catches, 3 games with 100-plus yards on the season. Very involved, very capable wide receiver option. Juwan Jennings, a lot less so. 2 targets last week, caught 1 of them for 8 yards. Yeah, I don't think we're going that deep on this board. I think you can limit yourself to the excellent running back, the 2 excellent wide receivers at the top, and the excellent tight end, and not get too caught up in going to the Juwan Jennings and Ray McClouds and Ronnie Bells of the world on this offense. If I did go that route, if somebody put a gun to my head and said you had to play one of these guys, even though he's not really a part of the offense, I might have to say it's Ray. He didn't play any snaps with the offense last week, just 6 on special teams, but he does have kick and punt return upside. So if you're looking for a dart, I might just head that direction instead. I don't know that there's much more upside for a Juwan Jennings. You're just looking for a home run play either way. But none of that is overly compelling. Kittle, just 3 catches last week, but turned it into 116 yards and a touchdown. 4 targets. Week before that, 9 catches on 11 targets, 149 yards. Had the 3 touchdown week in week 5. A monster any given week receiver. And, with these guys creating havoc, Kittle just kind of slips in there, and you see him just way too open on a lot of plays. It enhances the nature of the target for George Kittle in a lot of ways, having all 3 of these guys on the field. So I like Kittle in this spot. 6,400, 7,000. Cheap angle into this offense. And a fair amount of touchdown upside. Some security for a 100-yard game. Nothing not to like there. How popular is he? Oh my God, he's not popular at all. I won't say the number that he's at, but for you quick math magicians out there, it's half of 10. That's not a lot of ownership, guys. George Kittle is an interesting option in that San Francisco attack. Where is he? All right, so he's the most expensive tight end on DraftKings. And on FanDuel. All right, so maybe it's not as cheap as I was getting at. I guess I was getting enthusiastic about his price against the wide receiver pricing and like just star caliber player pricing. As a tight end, those are not cheap prices. Let's unwind that a little bit. But for the talent, for the upside, for the points, I think those are fair prices. I like that Kittle option. I got to say it. Low ownership. I know I said I don't care about individual player ownership. I care about when it's low. I don't care about it that much when it's high, if that makes sense. Getting a star like George Kittle for low to mid single digits ownership is appealing. And now we're all screwed up. I think we covered basically all these guys, right? It's really these four. These four. Plus their QB. Don't sweat many of these options. Cue the Kyle Juszczyk 3-touchdown game, of course. As I'm saying, don't sweat any of these options, but really, I mean, you're not really looking for the kick returner in any kind of realistic sense when you can go to Debo, Christian McCaffrey, those guys. You're not really looking for the Kyle Juszczyk fullback targets. Gets pretty thin. Some good bring-back options. I would use Rachaad White as a bring-back option. I would definitely use Mike Evans. I would definitely use Chris Godwin. I would probably trigger this game to have bringbacks with either stack in at least a few builds. Like if I do 10 rounds of lineup builds, I would trigger this one probably like 3 times in there to force run back plays, and I would hope that they came up a decent amount. Last game up, and then for whoever's still hanging out, I'll pop up Ace Mind. I actually ran some sims on this slate before the show. So we'll take a look at those real quick. Because we're coming up on... That was supposed to be the surprise at 10 o'clock, not at 11 o'clock. Will Levis, no thank you. Going up against the defense allowing 6.6 yards per pass attempt. That ranks 20th. They rank 8th with 3.8 yards per rush attempt. Maybe not a Derrick Henry day, but I don't think that means it's a Will Levis day. For every share of Will Levis that you get to, you should have 2 shares of DeAndre Hopkins. That's how key that connection would become. Chig Okonkwo hasn't really done much this season. Nick Westbrook-Ikini is your next man in at the wide receiver position. You're not dealing with a ton of talent in terms of the skill players outside of the 2 extreme talents in DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry. I think I just prefer going to those 2 as individuals if I'm doing anything with this game. But that said, Hopkins needs Will Levis to deliver the ball to him. Levis does throw the ball down the field. He's got that ability. And then Henry is going up against a kind of a stuff rush defense. Not perfect. For Levis, they're allowing 266 yards a game, 6.6 yards per pass attempt, 14 touchdowns on the season. Maybe a little bit more of an appeal there. 7.7 yard defensive ADOT. He's throwing the ball 35 times a game, completing 20 of them. 56% completion rate in his 3 games. 233 yards a game, 6.5 yards per attempt. And 11 intended air yards per attempt. Only completing 4.1 air yards per attempt, but intending to complete 11 air yards per attempt. They are taking shots down the field with Levis. 3 attempts over 30 yards already on the season. They've also dropped the ball 6 times on him already. It's just a little thin for my tastes. If you go to him, just pair him with Hopkins. Levis and Hopkins if you have to go there. Lawrence I like a lot better on the other side, but he's going up against a defense that's allowed just 227 yards a game despite giving up 7.2 yards per attempt. 10 touchdowns on the season. Sacked the quarterback 24 times, but they've only come up with 3 picks. That's appealing for Lawrence. He's thrown 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, just 235 yards a game, 33 attempts. As we talked about, it just hasn't had that biggie. Hasn't had the monster where he connects with ATN for a touchdown and then throws 2 to Ridley or whatever, or 1 to Ridley, 1 to Kirk or whatever. 14 drops on the season, only thrown the ball 24 times in the red zone too. Out of our regular quarterbacks, I suspect that's one of our lower marks. let's say damn it. So yeah, this is sorted by quarterbacks games played, right? So you have the guys played 10, 9, so on and so forth. Look at the stark differences in the red zone attempts for both Jared Goff, who they weren't throwing the ball in the red zone like at all early in the season, and then Trevor Lawrence, only 24 attempts in the red zone. That's significant. That's a big difference between him and all these other top quarterbacks. And Jordan Love's throwing the ball twice as often in the red zone than Trevor Lawrence. That has an impact. Now, part of that is driven by not completing your passes and having to throw it a second time. There is a little bit of that going on. But that's not great for Trevor Lawrence. That's why Jordan Love's throwing 14 touchdown passes to his 9. That's why, well, Dak Prescott. That's why Jared Goff, no, Sam Howell has 17 to his 9. Just throwing the ball, more opportunity. But still, against kind of a pass funnel D, with some very good weapons to work with, I'll just go back to the well with Trevor Lawrence. He's 6,000 on the DraftKings slate, 7,000 on FanDuel. Very solid overall projection. He ranks as quarterback 7 by points on FanDuel, but quarterback 2 by points per dollar. On DraftKings, that's quarterback 7 and 4. Once more into the breach with Trevor Lawrence, at least, and I think we'll do it again and again until it pays off. Travis Etienne, 72.83, high-end running back option. Let me get to his board here. Zay Jones still questionable for this one, by the way. Etienne, 9 carries last week for 35 yards. Just 2 catches on 4 targets for 9 yards. Basically his lowest end game of the entire season. That was that clunker against San Francisco, that's right. They just came out and flat disappointed in that game across the board. So not totally surprising that he didn't have a good one. 24 carries for 79 yards, 3 catches for 70 more, and a touchdown in the game before the bye in Week 8. That came against Pittsburgh. 6 targets in that game. But 149 yards and a touchdown on 27 touches. That's the kind of upside you get from Etienne any given week. Had 26 carries and 4 catches. It's another 30 touches back in Week 5. 21 touches in Week 6. 17 touches in Week 7, but scored twice. They put the ball in Travis Etienne's hands. There is no denying it. Calvin, just 2 catches, 20 yards last week in the clunker against San Fran. The week before that, 6 of 10 for 83. He's only been in the end zone twice this season. Only 200-yard games. One in Week 1. That was one of his touchdowns. And then one in Week 5. He didn't score a touchdown that week. The other touchdown was in Week 4. Just 2 catches, 38 yards in that game. But did get in the end zone. A really limited game in Week 7. Played 48 snaps, ran 28 routes, targeted just 4 times, caught 1 for 5 yards. Some ugly ones in here for Calvin. That's for sure. But 5,400, 6,500 with his ceiling that we know exists, I have no issues going to Calvin Ridley. Less expensive than Christian Kirk. Should we move these projections? Do we need to take a look at that? 104 yards on 6 catches for Kirk last week and 11 targets. He's been in the end zone 3 times all season, not since Week 7. They look really similar. Maybe instead of a... it's not like we're off by much in the projections. I think I still leave it this way. It's interesting that Kirk is a little bit more expensive. $600 more expensive on DraftKings, $400 more expensive on FanDuel. Kind of like Ridley a little better. Zay Jones questionable with a knee issue. Still, did he practice? Limited practice on Friday. We'll see what happens. Didn't play since week 5. Also didn't play in weeks 3 and 4. When he's out there, he's targeted, he's usable, he catches passes, he's been in the end zone twice. He's only made 8 catches all season. He's only been in 3 games targeted 18 times. But he's got 2 touchdowns. So if Zay's out there 41-55, I think you definitely include him in your plans. You include him in your groups and your stacks for Jacksonville. And then the big tight end, Evan Engram. Another piece of the puzzle. 4 catches for 12 last week, not great. 7 targets. 10 targets, caught all 10 of them the week before, or 2 weeks before their bye week against Pittsburgh. 10 for 88 in that game. Still yet to find the end zone this year. But a lot of 3 games with 7 catches. Another one with 6. 50s and 40s yardage totals, trending up to the 88-yard game. Hasn't been over 100 yards, hasn't gotten in the end zone. But not priced like a George Kittle. If you get the week where he gets the 8 catches, 80 to 100 yards and the touchdown, you're sailing at those prices. Nothing much downboard. I don't really pick up a little Tim Jones maybe if Zay doesn't play. Is Agnew out? I must have moved Agnew to the outboard. Yeah, Agnew's on IR. Yeah, so it's probably Tim Jones if Zay doesn't go. He had 2 catches, 17 yards on 2 targets last week. No targets on 6 routes run the week before the bye. 2 targets on 3 routes run, caught both of them for 17 yards in week 7. So, I mean, that's the kind of limited option you get to if you don't get Zay. So if you don't have Zay Jones, you only have 4 really good options to pair with Trevor Lawrence. If you get Zay Jones, you get a 5th. If you don't have Zay Jones, you really don't get another one with Tim Jones. He is 3,000, but the volume is so limited. I think that's it. I think that's all the options, all the things we got to talk about in that game. Which wraps us around to... did I miss the minus plus? Are you saying the above below column, yay? You haven't missed it yet? That one gets written overnight Sunday into Saturday morning in my marathon session of staying up all night. So I build a few, many thousands of lineups and update the groups column. And then based on that, based on what I see in Sims, based on some feel, it's the picks column, so I get to put a little bit of feel into it. But that gets written and posted it'll be up by 7, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning at the latest, and I'll probably get it done earlier this week, just because I have stuff to do tomorrow. So, yeah, keep an eye out for it, but you've not missed it yet. With that in mind, I'm going to pull up the Sims here real quick that I ran, as promised. A little surprise for everybody. We don't normally do this with football. But since it is a great tool and it's something I use, I ran a couple of Sims. We'll start with DK. This is from Ace Mind. For those of you guys who don't hang out with us for basketball, you've seen a little bit of Ace Mind, I think, for football. But they're a great site. It's a pay site. Excellent tools for basketball and football slates to run Sims. So this was run for DK against the main contest, the Millie 177,000 entry contest. Ideally, you want to create lineups and sim created optimized lineups against the pool that this tool creates. This will create the entire field of 177,000 lineups. It's actually probably the better way to show this now that I think of it. The file's so big that it comes down in a zip. I'm going to switch here real quick. Instead of showing you their screen. Not that the layout isn't good. But hang on one sec, because I want to take out a couple of things. Hang on one sec while I just get this squared away. Talk amongst yourselves. Anybody remember that Mike Myers sketch, the coffee talk with Linda Richmond? Here's a topic. Professional footballers who play in New York who got giant contracts that shouldn't have. Talk amongst yourselves. It's like the worst Linda Richmond impression ever. But who cares? I wasn't expecting to do it. I haven't heard it in years. That's just what you get. All right, let me pull up the different share here. It is... Wait, what's the name of that file? There it is. Perfect. You guys can read that, right? Stupid. All right. The reason I wanted to pull it out to the Excel output here is, one, to just show off the additional columns and things that you get here. Right? You get a little bit of information about what's in these lineups. But also, because it's building out 177,000-ish lineups to simulate the field, you do get weirdos like a QB plus 5s. We obviously don't want any of these. So I always go in here and make sure to trim these. And those are going to be down all the way at the bottom of the board anyway. They're just irrelevant, simulate the field kind of lineups. But you do want to take them out just in case something goes wacky. You don't want to be playing those. Ooh, there's a $1,000 average winner on the top of the board there. 49.5 total spend. It's a Jordan Love lineup. Look at that. Jordan Love, Davin Singletary, Breece Hall, Watson with Love, Tyreek, Christian Kirk, Freiermuth, Saquon, and the Bucks. Spends 49.5. Solid little ROI mark. Solid cash results. QB plus ones. In terms of win rates, that is our top winner. You get a little different shakeup in results if you sort by top ones versus... whoops. I did that upside down. That's going to take a second. Right, so some lineups have better chances of getting into the top 1% than into the winning range, but a lot of the overall top lineups remain the same. So like I said, I wanted to get in here to peel back the multi-player stacks, but then you don't get to see the individual player upside. So just kind of eyeball some of these lineups. See who's landing where. Pretty good spread of quarterbacks. Pretty good spread of stacks. Love, Goff, Fields, Purdy, Lawrence, Murray, Howell. Purdy? Did I say Purdy? Yeah, I had Purdy already. I mean, that's a good spread of 5-6 different quarterbacks in the top, what's that, 30 lineups? 29 lineups? As you go down board, you get, I'm sure, even more. There's a little Goff. Surprised he's not. Oh, yeah, he is. He's up here. Love that Goff. Excuse me. Love that Goff spot this week. You see, this one is interesting. Goff with Gibbs and Jamison. That's an interesting build. Leaves you a lot of money to spend. Getting to a super popular but expensive Trey McBride. Tyreek Hill in the flex spot. Saquon over here. This one's a little better looking, I think, if you're going Goff. I like Amon-Ra, I like Tank Dell from that. Ooh, I really like this actually too, because you get Tank Dell and Marquise Brown against one another. I always love grabbing that when I can. And I've got Amon-Ra and Sammy Laporta, so I've got a double. What I don't like about this lineup is the Freiermuth and the flex. That I don't like. Probably key. Is this a full price? Yeah. I would look to see what I could do probably by changing out the defense and grabbing a couple extra bucks to change that tight end flex to something else. Either a running back or a wide receiver. Not that it's terrible. It's a good use of that Pat Freiermuth extreme value because it unlocks this combination that is otherwise dynamite. And obviously, I mean, this lineup did perform like this across 50,000 sims. Right? So this is saying that this lineup is totally viable. So me saying I don't like Pat Freiermuth in that spot is kind of injecting some bad bias into this to a degree. Yeah, it's a good lineup.
I don't love the dual tight end, but it's defying what I love or don't. There's also a few dual tight ends up here. Fryermuth, Komet McBride, Thomas Fryermuth, Ingram Fryermuth. There's actually a lot of dual tight ends up here. Well, maybe something to consider on DK. Given the amount that it's appearing in these top overall lineups, and again, this is one set of sims, but it's run 170,000 whatever lineups 50,000 times. After a point, you do get some actual information out of these things that you can't just say, well, it's just one sim. Some part of me wants to say, it's just one sim. I would definitely rerun this a few times to see if this is consistently hitting the board this hard with these dual tight ends. That's kind of interesting for DraftKings. Let me bounce back over to that Ace Mine board. In terms of your ROIs, just looking at the individual players, Jordan Love. Not a lot of ownership on Love. It's driving a lot of that ROI. Pat Fryermuth, just so cheap. Creates such value. Strong win probability. Strong top 1 probability. Rondale. Called out Rondale as an interesting option in that Arizona stack, just given the uptick in involvement. Lawrence, Goff, love those two. Brian Robinson, a lot of enthusiasm there. This is why I like looking at the win rates a lot, though, because it's just weird. You're already talking about negative ROI numbers. So if we go by win rates on some of these guys, it's what I used in the NBA one. Singletary, obviously, a lot of chalk, going to be in a ton of high-end lineups. Tank I like. Tyreek makes a ton of sense. So Tyreek, Debo, Trey McBride, starish kind of guys falling in around the value plays. But interesting that it's Debo, not McCaff. Interesting that it's Tank. Mikey Wilson also landing on the board. Robert Woods, who we talked about, is an interesting option. I like that. Breece Hall. Everything that this board is showing me in terms of these winners, these are a lot of the guys that we said there's some enthusiasm about playing some of these guys. I like the way this broke down at the end of the show here. Just a lot of the guys that we had some enthusiasm about during the show hitting the board pretty hard in terms of our simulated win rates. Lockett expected to play? Sweet. Good stuff, Josh. Thank you. Good update, buddy. Let's just take a quickie look at FanDuel. I'm betting that we're not going to see the dual tight ends here. And we don't. I don't see any dual tight ends here. I see Dario Agbonwale. That's a little weird. Right? So, that's a pretty clear. Here's one. Trey McBride, Pat Fryermuth. But you got to go down, 50-ish lineups, down our top 150? So just kind of really interesting dynamic, DraftKings to FanDuel, how that DK 2 tight end, and it's a lot around Pat Fryermuth, creates some value and is maybe an interesting thing to consider for lineup building. FanDuel, as usual, more straightforward. That said, in our top lineups here, a lot of quarterback spread once again. And that's partly, when we looked at the quarterback board, remember, there were, 7, 8 guys projected between 20 and 18 fantasy points? It's a pretty open week in terms of how these stacks look and how these quarterbacks look. Fields, Goff, Stroud, Fields, Purdy, Lawrence, a couple of Purdys, another Stroud, Geno, Tua. Jordan Love down there. Love landing a little bit differently on FanDuel. Let's look at the individual rates. Still the top ROI individual. Less of a win rate, a little bit less of a top oneer, but a strong ROI number. Lawrence looking really strong. The Niners D looking like a positive ROI play. Oops, go by winners. Singletary again, top of the board. There's your Tony Pollard play for Tony Pollard fans. Second best win rate overall in this sim. Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Brian Robinson again, Brees, Connor, Debo, Robert Woods, Tyreek, Trey. I like how these break down. Maybe it's maybe it's not great because maybe it just feeds into the obvious chalk, but these are spread out over a lot of different spots, so not all of this is going to get crazy chalky. It's just about picking the right lanes in here. But when it gets this clear cut around plays that we kind of like, that we're screaming for attention off the board, as we've talked about these games over the last 3 hours and 15 minutes now, that's a lot of what we liked hitting the top of the board here. Austin Eckler, CeeDee Lamb down here, Ingram and Lawrence. I like it. I really, really like the way this slate shapes up. It looks ugly at the front, but once we get to this point, I kind of like it. Hopefully I like it even more after this slate runs and after we play these games. Vic, Jackson Smith and Jigba, you mean? Is that JSR? I think JSN, probably, right? Assuming that's who you talk about, yeah. Just given the fact that my big concern with him is typically in their normal configuration, his average depth of target is just so low. He's, let's go to, I know you guys can't see this, but I'm just going to pull it up real quick on my end so that I can actually cite those three guys and put them right here. 4.4 yard ADOT for Jackson Smith. 2 touchdowns on the season. Targeted 5 times a game, catching 3.5 of them a game. But just not a lot of separation from him in the line of scrimmage. He's just playing a lot, he's just kind of the underneath safety valve out of the slot. And, 4 and 5 yard averages 6.7 yards per target. By comparison, Tyler Lockett, 7.37 yards per target on a 10.6 yard ADOT. DK Metcalf, 8.9 yards per target on a ADOT that I have to unlock by changing his name. 12.7 yard ADOT. Only 2 touchdowns for him. Same touchdown total as Jackson Smith. But yeah, to me, it's if both of those guys are healthy, it's really just the top 2. You can throw darts at Jackson Smith for sure. 4,300 on DraftKings is perfectly fine. 55 on FanDuel. It's not a don't play, but it's a lot less shiny of an object with both Metcalf and Lockett in there. So, yeah, guys, I think that's about it. Just one more look at those FanDuel lineups. I know I didn't open the file for FanDuel, but this is what you'd be seeing anyway. A lot of good-looking lineups. FanDuel sure gives you that name value. It's always different, site to site. Got to get a lot more creative on DK. With that, guys, it's 11:22. Means it's about dinner time for me on a Saturday night. Gonna grab some food, a little late night grub, and then I'm gonna sit back down in this exact same seat. And I'm gonna knock out the updates for the projections. I'm gonna knock out the updates for the groups article. I'm gonna write the above below column. Gonna build my own lineups, get them entered for tomorrow, run a bunch of sims. Be here all night. Ask me in chat if you got any questions. I'll be in Discord. I'll be hanging around. Got to also watch the end of this NBA slate if it hasn't ended already. Let's see. Ooh, Thunder and the Warriors went to OT, huh? But it's basically over. No winners for me. Congratulations to Heine 2000. Looks like you held off at the top of the FanDuel slate. What did I not have? Was it Wemby? It was. How did I not have any on Wemby? That pisses me off. 65-point day for Wemby. 8 blocks. Goddamn. I had literally every other top guy. I don't know how I ended up. I got to check into that. That bugs me. Yeah, well, back at it tomorrow for football. Good luck out there, you guys. Oh, Wilson not expected to play now? Yeah, so then don't play him, and that's actually a bump to Rondale. I like Rondale even more now. Noah Brown unlikely to play. Okay. Creating some interesting downboard values at the end of the show here, Josh. I like it. With that in mind, you guys, keep an eye on the site for any changes, any updates. Follow at rotoscouts on Twitter. Hit the like button here. Hit the subscribe if you've not done that already. Hang out in the Discord, ask questions in there. Good luck tomorrow. Somebody go win something, and I'll see you probably back on Monday. See you later, guys.